Yeah.
All
But
right.
I think a lot of times it's the onboarding within the department that you don't see. It's like, here's your work, this is what you need to do, and good luck.
You're live.
Yeah.
Or does it matter?
Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to Leadership Branding Strategies for Growing. My name is Rosemary Madnick, and I am the Executive Director for the Office of Grants and Contracts Administration. So first of all, I'd like to thank everyone here within the office and outside in the virtual world for attending the presentation. And I want you guys all to know personally how I appreciate each and every one of you as staff and what you do every day to make sure that you facilitate things within your department, you help your bosses out, and you help UAF out. So thank you. So one of the things I really want everyone to keep in mind is this quote: hold yourself responsible for a higher standard than anybody else expects of you. Never excuse yourself, never pity yourself, be a hard master to yourself, and be lenient to everyone else. So just remember this as we go through these. So a part of leadership branding is, first of all, here's a slide, would you mind enhancing my personal brand? Not at all, dear chap. So one of the things I'm going to ask for you guys to do, and this is going to be a very interactive presentation. I want you all to take out a piece of paper right now. So one of the things I would like for you to write down is write down some of the values you want to project about yourself. Are you stylish? Are you professional? Are you cool? Are you traditional? Are you international? Are you creative? Are you artsy? And if you were a car, what kind of car would you be? If you were a painting, what kind of painting would you be? If you're an actor, actress, who would you like to be as an actor, as an actress? You don't have to answer these, but you kind of get where I'm going with some of these. If you're a clothing label, what kind of clothing label would you be? If you were a song, what would that song be? If you were an animal, what kind of animal would you be? And if you were a drink, what kind of drink would you be?
Go ahead.
So as you answer some of these things, and like I said, I want this to be very interactive right now. So think about what you've written down about some of these things I've thrown out. And one of the things with personal branding is that research shows that it takes 30 seconds for someone to form a lasting impression of you. So it goes back to, but yet it takes another 20 further experiences with that person to change a negative impression of that person. So that's why personal branding is so important. Personal branding is an image is created in the minds of people when they hear a name, they see a product, or a logo. A personal brand is the public perception of a person's personality, skills, and values. So now I'm going to ask some of you. So, for example, if you were a car, what kind of car would you want to be?
Want it or what we think we are?
It doesn't matter. What do you think you are?
Probably a Subaru.
Okay, and what do you think that says about you?
Just that, just keep going and going and going.
Okay.
Nothing really stands out, just a real...
Uh-huh. Okay, anyone else if you were a car?
Yeah, kind of on that line, reliable.
Okay.
Dependable car.
Okay. Okay,
I would
Clay.
want to be the one vehicle on the highway that nobody notices, that gets me there without worry every single time and causes no problem.
So you're a Prius. So if you were an animal, what kind of animal would you be? Or what kind of animal do you think you are? So you can kind of get the gist of how, you know, going back to, you know, your personal brand is an image that people have in their minds. So another thing I'm going to do as far as an exercise, how many of you have smartphones with you? So another thing is, have you ever tried to Google yourself? Okay, now Google yourself right now. And then what I want you to do, even for those of you out in the virtual world, I want you to Google yourself, then hand your phone over to your neighbor. And then I want your neighbor to then, based on the image that is on your phone that you've pulled up, your neighbor is going to give you what's the first perception that they think of you.
Just our name? Or...
Your first and last name would help, yes.
It's like, okay.
But, and then hand it to someone, so.
And you want us to pull up the pictures, the images?
No, just pull up anything, whatever comes up first in your.
There you guys can switch.
That's right.
Okay, so do you want to?
Oh, image?
No, it doesn't matter. Whatever comes up first. Here's mine right here.
My picture's actually on there.
Okay.
Yeah. It is.
So tell me, what does her first image, the first perceptions say about Margot? Now that you've pulled it up.
Well, it's just the picture, so it looks like her. It looks,
Is there any words that come up with it besides her picture?
Not with the picture.
Okay.
I'd have to scroll through some pages.
Okay. I've given Clay mine. What does mine say?
Talks about you accepting the role you're in now.
Uh-huh.
Description of your position.
Okay. Anything else?
It's pretty much just
Okay.
I haven't linked anything. I was just reading it. So.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything else that comes up?
Adam has LinkedIn coming up,
Mm-hmm.
and the first images I see, I mean, if I didn't see Adam sitting right here in front of me, it looks like professional but adventurous with the pictures that pop up.
Okay. Anyone else want to go ahead?
I have a bio from a banking finance group.
Okay.
I think that's, yeah.
Okay.
So for Maria, it's coming up on the Office of Grants and Contracts website, and it's just, there's no picture or anything, so it's just kind of like a list of, I don't know, agencies, and I guess I would just say professional. Not too much.
Because,
Yeah, information.
I'll tell you, like on mine, it comes out, I've got a LinkedIn account, my UIF. I worked for UCLA CTSI discovering, accelerating discoveries, primarily around biomedical research. I have a Twitter account. I've worked for a research institution. I've done financial conflict of interest. I have a Pinterest. So what does that tell you? I'm LinkedIn in very many different avenues. So you can find me in different ways. So when looking at some of your neighbors, we're going to go ahead and move on. Do any of your neighbors that you have their phone, are they linked in just any other way, or you just see that one spot that says, this is who I am? So what is personal branding then? So personal branding.
Can you return the phones to their...
Yes, you can return the phones. Okay.
You get your bank name.
Yeah. So personal branding, again, is rather than expecting our workplace organization to assist us in career development, we have to be proactive in what we do. So job security, of course, is a thing of the past, and it's not enough to focus in on job competencies, because in today's workforce, candidates get interviews on what they do best, not on just what they can do. And as you can see, we live in an information superhighway. And the first thing that many employers do, or anyone does, I mean, whether you're an employer, could be if you're dating, it could be whether you want to volunteer for a professional organization. the first thing a lot of people are going to do is to go look you up online, and it's like, what is that personal branding that's being eluded from that online presence that you have? So a lot of this, what this is saying is that you have to take control of what you want other people. You have to take control of what you want other people to see, what you allude out there. So a lot of what we have to do, and it's not just on what we have here on our smartphones, but image management is how you shape people's perceptions by changing who you are on the outside. Personal branding is how we market ourselves to others by revealing who we are on the inside. So it's something to be said that if you want for people to treat you very seriously, you know, like if you're a professional, you guys are all here. If you want people to really take you seriously, it's like, what's the first image that that someone comes up with in their mind? So a good brand, whether it's your online image or whether it's your offline image, a good brand conveys intrinsic value, expectation of performance, trust, and is predictable. So part of like having your personal brand is that, for example, if someone sees you coming to the meeting, they're going to know what to expect of you every single time, just, you know, possibly in the way you carry yourself, the way you look, the way you speak. So, but by branding yourself, you separate yourself from the crowd and you create a greater impact. Because that's all about, that's what personal branding is. It's like, what makes me different? What makes you different? What makes you different, Margot? So that way when somebody sees Margot coming, it's like, I want to just go towards Margot. There's something about her that she eludes this confidence. And that is your personal brand. So as you can see on this slide that comes up, it's like these are all personal brands. So for example, if you were to see, let's pick up a famous brand right now, the Golden Arches. What's the first image that comes into your mind for the Golden Arches?
No, I don't think of the food. I think of the buildings. I think of the restaurants themselves, not the food, actually.
But
French fries.
But think about it. That's why branding is so important. So if you can take all of these companies, the first thing that you think with the Golden Arches, like you say, it's the building. Whether you go to a McDonald's in Fairbanks, you go to a McDonald's in Los Angeles, you go to a McDonald's in New York, you're going to have that consistent. The building's always going to look the same. The menu is going to look the same. And the people and their uniforms, you're going to have the same consistent quality. So a lot of branding, like what all of these particular for-profit agencies do, for-profit companies do, we are taking that concept and applying it to our daily lives and personal branding ourselves. So then that way, when someone sees you, it says, okay, look, I know I'm going to get consistency. I know I'm going to get honesty. I know what I'm going to get from it. So that's why personal branding is really an important concept. So why does it matter? Personal branding matters because it's your brand that sets the tone for who you are. It communicates the difference between you and everyone else. So once again, we just went through this exercise of Googling yourself. So if you were to, like we said, if an employer was to Google you, do you think your online branding image will set you apart from everyone else? What do you guys think?
Well, not for me. As soon as I Google myself, I come up with other people, not me. I guess I have to really specify my middle lineage with everything.
Mm-hmm.
I try not to be up there just because of what I do. I try to keep my stuff private. I'm actually surprised that picture shows up.
And that's something that you brought up an interesting point because with, like, for example, with when you Google myself, all you will see is everything to do with work. You will not see my personal life in there. And that's the key to personal branding, is being able to separate out your personal life from your professional life. So because ultimately that's why we're here, is for personal branding ourselves, for us to put ourselves out there so people can get to know ourselves. And also too, so potential employers can find out more about you, making it easier for them to decide if they want to work with you or not. And another really good thing is that the personal branding is also really interesting, because it's not just that personal, that employers can come and look for you. I've had folks that, let's say, I'm interested in, I do a lot of volunteering, and I'm interested on being on a couple of nonprofit boards. So this is a way to advertise yourself, and it's like, look, do we want this person on our board? Because being on this board is going to be a representation of ourselves. So the personal branding just isn't just for your personal work. It can also be for volunteer opportunities. It can go for, maybe you want to go ahead and pursue some sports activities. So your personal branding that's what it can be used in so many different ways. And especially, like we just said earlier, we live in a knowledge-driven society where experience no longer puts you on an edge, because you have to be able, it's about your image, what you know, but it's also your experience. Where before, as recent as maybe 5 to 10 years ago, it's about your experience. But now, because we live in such a world that everything is branded, it's like, it's that other piece of it. It's like people want to know about you in different ways. So today's job seekers must stand out. Your reputation, experience, all of that is your brand. So for example, if you're looking for a job, employers take 15 to 30 seconds reviewing your application to determine if they're interested in you. That is all it takes. So there has to be something else that stands out about you, so you get the interview in there. Or perhaps you're not ready to move on yet, but it's like, hey, I want to go volunteer for this committee. They have your resume there. Yeah, it's nice, but what is it about your your online presence, your branding, that's going to make you stick out a little bit more? Mm-hmm. Everything okay?
Yeah. Just wanted to make sure you're still alive, because my boss texted me.
Okay. We just had some technical difficulties. I think we're back on now. So successful branding involves 3 things. Bless you. There's preparation, there's packaging, and there's presentation. So preparation is like with anything. It's doing your homework, it's doing your due diligence, it's identifying your brands. What's one of the things you want someone to know? It's like, I'm an honest person, I have integrity. How would you convey that? How would you convey that in your brand? You're reliable. How would you convey that in your brand? So that's the prep work that is involved. I can think of a way that you might want to convey you're reliable and you have integrity and honesty. Perhaps volunteering for a committee, or volunteering out in the community somewhere. Conveys honesty, integrity, and reliability, because that shows that you're doing something else. That's another commitment that you have to be reliable for. Perhaps chairing, we'll take this for example, perhaps chairing the Staff Appreciation Day shows reliability. So there's some things that you could do to help prep for some of those things. So going back to, once again, getting some of your what are some of the values that you want to convey? But how do you convey those values that you can't just say, look at someone and go, that's what honesty looks like. There has to be other stuff that goes with it. So once again, know your value. Do a self-assessment on you. Do you have the skills? Do you have the competencies, accomplishments, strengths? Are you limited? Perhaps you want to be able to learn to do something else. It's like, for example, you might say you are, part of your brand is you are an expert in all things to do with databases. But yet there might be something that's missing where you may not have access experience. I know that's really, but you get what I'm saying is that. So if you're going to portray this particular brand and say you're going to have these particular skills and interests, make sure that whatever you say matches that. Are there network? One of the things that I really encourage everyone to do is network. I cannot talk enough about networking. Networking is probably the lowest hanging fruit for growing your brand. So one of the things I'm going to encourage everyone here and out in the virtual world is I want everyone to walk out of here with an email of someone, and you guys are to email each other, because that's how you begin to grow your network. Because another thing that's really an easy thing to do, if you go to like a committee meetings or you go to do activities, the easiest thing to do is exchange an email. You get back and you say, hey, Margot, it was really nice to meet you at the leukemia and lymphoma activity. I really enjoyed meeting you. Here's my information. That's how you begin to network. That's how you begin to connect with people, because then people start to remember you that way. So once again, that's all a part of preparing. Another thing too is that a part of preparing is to create your goals. So it's one thing to have a brand, but if you don't have goals that are associated with your brand. So one of the things is that what are some goals that you want to do for yourself, and you want your brand to be able to feed into that, and vice versa, your goals feed into your personal brand. So another thing too is that what I would do is like craft and articulate your 5-minute elevator speech. Because how many times do you, at least in my line of work, you go somewhere, because I'm in research administration, and people are like, well, what is that? So crafting up your 5-minute elevator speech, and it says, I'm in research administration. Hi, my name is Rosemary Madnick. I'm in research administration. In research administration, we help manage the incoming and outgoing grants and contracts for the University of Fairbanks. Easy, 5-minute, people at least know what you do. So once again, crafting what you do. So tell me, do you have your 5-minute elevator speech, what you do?
I do have my business card.
Okay, you have your business card. Okay, we'll take that. Clay?
Yeah, probably not 5 minutes, but.
Well, tell us in a sentence.
I'm the superintendent of the power plant, and I'm all about safety and integrity and compliance, and everything else comes after that. So if we can't run the place safely and within environmental compliance, we're probably not going to run it at all.
That's always been something I struggled with, trying to make it sound professional. But I'm working for the Alaska Center for Energy and Power, which is a program to the Institute of Northern Engineering. And my job is basically a hat rack. So I wear some different hats.
That's a great way to start your elevator speech. Everybody goes, wow, that's really interesting. Then they want to get to know you a little bit more. The power plant's another great thing. It's like, I help manage, I help supervise the power plant. Like, wow, what is that? So these are some things. So really get your elevator speech out. And then the more you talk about it, you feed in your goals, you feed in the values, you'll start to begin to see your personal branding coming about. One of the things I cannot overemphasize is really having a really good positive attitude, because things are stressful in your work life, your personal life, and everything else. And it's really important, especially when you start to get to your personal branding, is just to have that really good positive attitude. Because how many times have you can think of a person and the first thing you go to is a place of negativity. You're like, oh my gosh, they're always complaining. And how do you feel about that person? Do you want to be around them? That's the personal brand that they convey. And I'm not saying we have to go around and have this happy Pollyanna attitude, but at least to, just be really genuine and really, really real about it. And I think that's a part of, once again, it's prepping yourself. Next thing is your packaging. So create your portfolio, build your brand. So you have to kind of look at it and say, well, here is my personal brand. How do I want to package myself? Do I want to be on LinkedIn? Do I want to start my own blog? Do I want to be on Twitter? Do I want to be on Facebook? Do I want to be on Snapchat? Do I want to be on... So you have to decide where you want to be, where you think your personal brand is really going to gather you the most strength, where you can get the best bang for your buck. So how many folks have a LinkedIn account? And how often do you update it?
Not very often. It seems more of like a spammy type of thing to me, so I try not to use it that much.
Okay.
I have what I do on my LinkedIn account, but I really don't like to share a lot of information on the internet.
Mm-hmm.
So I just really put the bare minimal out there. Because I'm not using LinkedIn as a,
Mm-hmm.
I guess.
See, that's a perfect example. Going back to when you have a personal brand, you have to figure out is that if I'm going to have a personal brand, where do I feel I'm going to have the best, where is it the place that's going to benefit me the most? So, yeah. So for me, I use LinkedIn a lot, but once again, my LinkedIn is strictly professional. So when I go to professional associations, meetings, or when I go and meet with external funders, I go ahead and get their business cards, and then I connect through them on LinkedIn. So a lot of times it's like, whether it's Facebook, LinkedIn, or just even your listservs that you might have in your offices, is just really trying to really figure out that, do I want to control my information, or is the information controlling what I put in there? So that's something to also consider for that. So how do you want your packaging to be done? Because I firmly believe technology should not drive you. You should drive technology into whatever you put up there. And then another thing too is, like, for those of you who do decide to use a lot of these like social media out there, I would suggest you put it on the strictest filters that you have. Like, for example, on my Facebook, I have it on the strictest filters. So a picture of me cannot be posted unless I approve it. So once again, it goes back to, there are tools out there, but you have to learn how to manage those tools that have your information, because your information is your identity. It's your personal brand. Another thing with the packaging is what I tell a few of some of the folks I've mentored along the way, is that keep your CV or your resume on your desktop. And your CV and resume isn't necessarily there to look for a job. If that's what it's there for, your personal branding isn't going to be used for. Your CV or resume on your desktop is supposed to be used as a way to keep track of some of the things that you've done. So for Clay, you could sit on some committees, and you want those committees to be reflected in your resume, Because what happens is that your resume tells a story about your work. And if you've done presentations, put those presentations on there. Because so let's say that somebody comes up to you and says, Clay, I want you to serve on the University of Alaska Committee on Safety. You don't want to have to go there last minute to be searching and putting things together, because you have your whole work history there, from your committees to your activities that you've done to presentations that all speak to you. So that's another way, without using, for those of you who may not use, social media, that's another way to personal brand your stuff, because then that way you get your information about you out there to folks. So what it does is that by keeping everything on your resume and CV easily accessible, it's really easy to create a history. And what you're doing is that, how many of you have received awards? Do you put those on your resume? See, you should. That's an amazing accomplishment. How many of you have written articles? Perfect thing to put on there. And another thing too is, like I said, serve on committees and boards both professionally and personally, because I think that what happens is that part of your personal branding is you want to be as well-rounded as possible. So if there's an opportunity to serve on a board for a local, food bank, and it's something that fits your values, your personal goals, I say go for it. Because what happens is that it gives you an opportunity to, number one, meet people outside of work. You get to be in a different environment that you may not have had the opportunity. And then you get to have different types of experiences of being on a board. So how many of you have been on a board? Yeah, it's very, very different. But once again, it goes back to your personal branding. So it's a really great opportunity. Another thing too is you may not have the opportunity to serve on a board or volunteer for a board, but there's lots of committees here on campus. And I used to tell my folks, especially when it comes to personal branding, if somebody asks for a volunteer, because you never know who is watching you. And once again, it's all about your experience. It's about you bringing something to the table. So these are all the kinds of things that you could do for your personal branding. The last thing I'm going to say with packaging is that if you are in your field, so Ramon, what field are you in?
I work at Office of Admissions, and right now I evaluate transcripts for transfer students.
Mm-hmm. Do you stay on top of what you do in your field?
Yeah, we do have several listservs that we get updated information and trends in the industry, which there are many coming.
Mm-hmm. Margot, what about you?
Yeah, we have a lot of national organizations that we're members of, and get regular updates and, with law and trends that are going on, things that are happening in the court system.
Mm-hmm. One of those things is stay current in your field, because once again, it goes back to your personal branding. Because you can't say you're in HR and it's like, well, such and such is coming up and you didn't hear, like, what? I didn't hear about that. So because once again, it's the perception that you are the expert in that field and you're staying on top of it. Same thing, Clay, with you. Things in your field, of course, with the power plant coming aboard. Staying current and things like that. So, and also too, with a part of your personal branding, going back to the packaging, is always be in a state of continuous learning, and that's what your personal brand is. Because once you have your brand, it doesn't mean you want to stay stagnant, because in 5 years, trends change, your job can change, so many different factors can change, and you always want to stay current and relevant. That's another key with personal branding. Just stay on top with making it a learning experience. Another thing too with a presentation, deliver your message, articulate and enhance your brand. So it's just putting yourself out there. So part of the presentation is, it's networking, getting out there, meeting people. It's like, hey, my name is Ramon. I would love to be able to serve on a student advisory committee. It's your presentation, coming up with your 5-minute elevator speech because I've done X, Y, and Z, and this is why I would like to do this. And you exhibit enthusiasm. So one of the things too with your presentation is you market your awareness and you get your name out there so people know who you are. You want people to know who you are without having to see your face. And it's like, LP, oh my goodness, I finally get to meet you. You don't want to be a wallflower because that's not what personal branding is. It's about putting yourself out there. So when I think of HR, I think of Margot, besides Brad. But yes. But you see what I mean? Because you want people to associate what you do, your brand, your values, your goal with your name. And you know you really hit it if they haven't even seen you yet. So that means you really have gotten a lot of your stuff out there. And like another thing too with the as far as the presentation is, create key alliances and partnerships and align yourself with people who you admire and respect. So if there's someone out there in another department that you really admire and respect them, go up to them and say, you know what, I really like what you're doing, and create that. That's a part of your networking. And you will be surprised how people will be very open to say, and try and, mentor you along. And talking to some folks, it's like, wow, I really like, what you do. How did you get to how did you get to where you are? So now we're going to get into the steps. So part of the steps right now is really take the time to do some soul searching and determine exactly who you are and what makes up your brand. So once again, are you patient? I think authentic is really, really important because you want to be authentic and you want to be genuine. You want to be consistent. You want to be responsible, helpful. So once again, I'm challenging you all once you leave here, do some, sit back, some quiet time and come up with a list of 5 things of what you think defines you or how you would like to be. How would you like for others to perceive you? You don't want people to define you. You want to be able to define yourself. Come up with your goal statement. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Does what you come up with here come in line with that? Once again, we talked about establishing a presence. You might want to build an online presence. Decide where is it you want to go. If you want to run student services one day for, the university, perhaps where you need to be is to build an online presence so people know you as, here's Ramon, he's the student services guru of everything. So you have to decide what platforms are best for you to build that personal branding presence. Stay relevant. So one of the things that's...
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Regarding a 5-year plan, how does it seem when your statement is, I want to take this person's job?
Well, you don't say that, first of all.
But I want to be head of director of such and such. We have a director here. How is that seen?
Well, what you do is that I don't think reality that people go through life and say, I want to be this person. But what you can do is you can then say, I would like to be that, but I'm going to be my own person when I do it. But a part of it is like, what has that person done in their course of their experience to get to where they're going? And what you can do as part of your 5-year plan is work towards that. So perhaps maybe they've got like certifications that gave them the qualifications for that, but you don't have it. So at least you know, like, okay, I know in the next few years I have those certifications. So that's why it goes back to you have to stay relevant, because getting someone's job or wanting to like emulate or be someone in the future, it's not just like, hey, I'm here all of a sudden. People work very hard to get to where they're going, and you have to say, okay, what path do I need to be on? So therefore, when an opportunity comes up, I am in line to be with that position. And so that's why staying relevant, whether it's taking additional coursework, sometimes in the field, a bachelor's is not enough. You're like, I have to go get a master's degree. Maybe finance was where you needed to get it. Now it needs to be in marketing. So it's deciding where the trends are and staying relevant. And I think a part of where you want to be in 5 years, let's say hypothetically, it's that position. It's all about positioning yourself. So then therefore when an opportunity comes up, you're perfectly positioned and no one can say, well, you don't have the qualifications, you haven't walked the walk, you haven't talked the talk. You see? So once again, visualize, walk, and talk your brand. So, like for example, if you want to be, using your example, it's like you have to walk and talk it, and so then that way you have to walk, talk, and visualize it.
So what would I say? What would you like to be in 5 years? I guess I want to be director of such department. What would I say?
I would say in 5 years, I want to be the best person I can be in my field. Because reality, I'll give you a perfect example. In our field, in research administration, it changes all the time. And so the thing with that, if I say, well, in 5 years, I want to be the director of the pre-award office, when I hit that 5 years, perhaps that pre-award office is no longer, it's not where the market is happening, but it might be, well, now it's the compliance office. So that's why you have to stay relevant. If you stay relevant, then the path will automatically be opened for you. So that's just my only advice. But I think it's really important not to be that specific because the industry changes so much. I mean, it's the same with HR. There's so many different things that come out based on laws and legislation. So that's why if you say, I'm going to be the very best HR person that there is, and then therefore when something happens, then Margot is perfectly positioned to then say, because she stayed relevant in her field.
I think some of it too is if you look at the level of responsibility that you're striving to achieve, like if you're looking to be in a leadership role versus one of the, a technical or a support role. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Another thing too is to adapt to the changes in the world, in the job market. I can't emphasize that enough because that's a part of your brand. You have to stay adaptive. And I know some things are really hard, in the marketplace, but if you don't adapt and change right away, it makes it very difficult. Like, for example, in our industry, there's a major government change that's going to happen and hasn't been seen in probably in over 20, 25 years that's really going to impact a lot of universities, especially as the way they manage their grants and contracts. Regardless, I could fight this till the cows come home, it's not going to change. So the way that you can pick out the people who want to move forward or don't, it's like, I'm embracing it. It's going to be hard. Let's just go and let's adapt. Let's be flexible. It's not going to be easy, but we just have to, rock and roll and see how this thing goes. So that's another key to it. It's like, how adaptable and flexible are you? Another thing too is that really evaluate your brand and get 360-degree feedback. I get feedback from people above me. I get feedback from people that I might supervise, or maybe I may not supervise them. Or I might get feedback for some of my peers. Because LP will tell you, it's not usual for me to go up to them and go, so how am I doing? Different things. And I think that feedback is really important. And but it's really important that when people give you feedback, you have to be able to listen to that feedback. So don't ask someone to give you feedback if you're not willing to listen to that feedback. But once again, a part of that is another thing that people might do is to get your own board of directors. And this is a term with like the personal branding that my mentor had given to me years and years ago. When you have a board of directors, this is a board of directors for you personally. So it's people that you can go to and trust with anything. So you might be on my board of, Rosemary Madnick's board of directors. Ramon, I'm thinking of doing X, Y, and Z. Talk to me about this. And and someone who can really give you honest feedback. And I would say you should at least have 3 people on your personal board of directors. And those people will help you with helping you to establish your brand. So you can go to the 3 people that you trust and that you know will give you really good advice, not what you want to hear, but what you should hear, and say, by the way, I forgot your name, I'm sorry. Julia. By the way, Julia, you've approached, I'm on your personal board of directors. Julia says to me, what is the first thing that you think about when you see me? And that's another great way to start to developing your brand. Start with people that you can trust, because believe me, people will give you an honest answer with that. So that's another thing too. So you do your soul searching, get your personal board of directors. And these, and the people that I have are really good, and it's nice because when you go through like certain decisions, whether it's career decisions or serving on some external committees, it always goes back to, are you in line with your goals that you've set up for yourself that feeds into your own personal branding? So that's another great way to get some 360. So earlier we had said your elevator pitch. So this is like another thing you do for your elevator pitch. So I am a blank line specializing in, what do you do? Why are you best at what you do? And what is your call to action? Because a lot of times people want to know, just don't talk about yourself, but what can you do? You want to be really actionable. So that's another way when you establish your presence is, like we said, come up with your elevator pitch. So here's a sample of one. Hi, my name is Jason Thorpe. I'm a game director at Black Rock Studio, specializing in racing games. I've been working on video games for 12 years. I've been at Climax Racing for 4 years, and that's released over 50 brands and over 50 brands of video games, and I've gotten awards. Some people might be very pompous, but you only have that small window of opportunity. And that's a really different change for folks, is that it's very hard for people to talk about themselves, but each and every single one of you have something to offer and something that you're proud of. So why not just tell people, like, I was able to get, my department was, $30 million in the hole, and I got that down to 0. What a great accomplishment. You should be able to tell the world. That's your personal brand. Wow, we've got consistency, we have a hard worker, we've got somebody who knows numbers. So don't be afraid to sell yourself. And that's a part of your personal brand. Like we brought up all of those companies that were out there. I can guarantee you they are not afraid to tell people what they do best. Look at Apple. It's not afraid, to tell you what you do best. So we should also do that with our own personal lives when we personal brand. So like we said earlier, generate awareness through networking. Find out how others see you. That goes back to your board, your personal board. Identify your target audience. So Ramon, for example, using your example of wanting to be eventually the director of student services, it's like, what's your target audience to make sure that you need to get there? So if you wanted to be the director, you wouldn't necessarily be targeting clay. You'd be targeting people in your field. So it's very systematic. And then reorganize your priorities. So if that's your priority, what is it that you need to do to make sure that you get there? It's like, I need to take a class. I need to get this certification. And you just need to, rearrange your priorities. And then once again, always commit your personal brand. So you have to walk it, talk it. Another thing of branding is the 3 C's. We call it clarity, consistency, and constancy. So be clear in who you are and what you're not. Don't sugarcoat your qualifications. Express your brand across all communication mediums. Determine where you want to fit in and remain visible at all times. So once the thing, it's like, don't oversell yourself, but it goes back to being very authentic and genuine. Because if you're authentic and genuine, then things will come. So just be really clear and consistent. So some of the closing thoughts is, before embarking on your personal quest, be specific with your goals. What do you want others to think when you speak about yourself? Take a critical and objective look at where you are now. Set your realistic goals based on those observations. Those goals should not be hollow. It's easier to create a map when you know what you want, where you want to go. So be accountable. Brand accountability is so crucial to both the good and the bad times you're likely to experience throughout your career. So you just need to be accountable. So if you say you're going to do something, do it. If you aren't able to do it, be very honest and say, you know what, I can't do it. People will appreciate that instead of trying to gloss it over. So accountability is something that's important. Find your niche in what you do and dominate in that. So if, like for example, if your niche is grants and contracts, find it and dominate and be the best person you can at that. The thing is that it's, it's like, for example, let's say HR. HR is like research administration. There's so many different places that you can go with HR and be a specialist in it. But in order to find your personal brand, find out what you're good in and be good in it. Because then therefore, if somebody's looking for something, you're the one person they're going to start to think about. And then another thing too, engage in different types of social platforms, whether it's social media, whether it's networking, just get out there. So we talked about planning is essential. Be true to yourself, be accountable, find your niche, and engage in social platforms. So these are some of the resources that I've used before with the branding, is the Me 2.0 and then the brand called You. So we're just about to close. So these are some of the rules, so we can close with and some take-home points for you. Pinpoint your skills, your passions, and the selling parts of your personality. So once again, like we said earlier, don't sell yourself short. You all have amazing personalities. Find something that works in your passion. Determine the need in your market area. So maybe there's a particular niche that you could fill within student services, and fill that particular need. Create, like we said, your personal branding statement that says to your boss, your potential employer, you'll be crazy to go with anyone else. So find out what your personal branding statement is. Tailor your personal branding statement to the requirements of a specific job, industry, a client, and then incorporate your brand, like we said, into everything you do, whether it's your resume, your job interviews, you're cultivating new clients. Let's say you want to be on a board, you're cultivating new relationships. Broadcast your brand and receive the visibility to put you on top. So here's some ideas and tools for you to brand yourself. Not everyone does this, but if you like to write, register a website. Let's say that you're good at safety And you can say, well, I'm going to be the safety girl, because that's how people get out there. That's their personal brand. So that's one way to do it. If social networking is your niche, find out where you want to go. Don't spend all your time on all of them, but concentrate on the ones that are used in your industry. So that's another way to balance the social media things that happen. This one is so underutilized right here, be a resource. So one of the things is you may not have your own website, your own blog, but at least here in UAF, if you want to dominate in what you do, you be a resource in the thing that you really are good at, and that's how you can start to establish your own little personal brand, and you'll be viewed by some of your colleagues. So create forward-looking profiles, if you use LinkedIn, titles, description to better position yourself. So for example, you can't just say, well, I'm grants and contracts. So what are you? Are you a grant accountant? Are you post award? Do you specialize in different things? So really look at if you decide to go through an online, to use online stuff to help with your personal branding, always keep a current picture on there because it's really, really important. And as much as possible, try and create a professional looking photo because you can pick out the ones that's like, here, I'm going to do a selfie right now. So once again, it's all a part of that image. Know your elevator pitch. Having an elevator pitch about yourself, what you do, and how you help others. And then tailor your resume to support and emphasize the core of your brand. So a strong personal brand is a mix of reputation, trust, attention, and execution. So go out there and brand yourself, and don't forget to exchange business cards, and thank you very much for attending the session.
Thank you.
I'm not going to sign out.
Okay.
You want to do it?
Or stop it
Okay, you have to do it for me.
all day, like it goes outside.
Okay. Can we go on to the next one? Are there any questions?
Here's one.
Definitely. Look it, and I've got mine here.
The first thing I thought when you mentioned, and not that I want to be director.
No, I know, I totally get it.
Just wondering how does that cross, and obviously not to say something like that.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned
No, it was great because it was great for like interacting and things like that.
you mentioned volunteering, making workshops, and you mentioned feedback. That's something I thought about.
Yeah.
Something that I wonder is,
Definitely.
do I?
Yeah, at least.
I guess the intent is not a concern. Do I do something with the objective of I want to be able to make myself more visible? So I'm gonna be in this not so much because I want to, but because I need that.
I think you have to look at what your motivation is because
In this day and age, motivation is
right. So what what I've done is like I did a lot with because I have a background in biomedical research. So a lot of what I used to do is I used to go do volunteering like breast cancer, and then you get out there and you meet people, and then what happens is that there's a natural thing that occurs. You say, you know what, I really like this. And so the thing that comes back to you in the project is just go out there and volunteer, and then what you'll end up having is that a natural occurrence will happen. It's like, well, it wasn't about the volunteering, but you become instinctively that like, God, this feels really good about volunteering, and people can say, oh my God, Ramon, he works at UAF. Tell me about it, because now when they think of UAF, they think of.
I think of in schools, people that want to be in student government, they just want to have the resume. I'm not interested in serving. I just want this.
But when you
that always feels ugly.
It doesn't,
But it seems not.
But it has to be a balance. That's the whole thing. It has to be a balance. Like there's, oh, let me just give this to you real quick. I have this one coming. Yeah, if you want the business card. No, if just sign in if you want me to send you the presentation.
Okay.
So,
Here.
I think
I've been like moving around for a while.
I came over from LA. I went to high school.
I went to the same group of guys.
Then I went to state. But I have been here since.
Yeah, I know you guys
So
don't
that's a,
typically
I saw this.
do it. I'd like to get rid of
volunteering. Maybe it's not a loss, maybe it's something outside.
What do you do?
Hey, I want to do everything.
Oh, yeah.
Being reliable, so you can
Sure.
before you then become a patient. That's your pattern, you're reliable.
So you guys just merged with,
Yeah, CES and
Feel much better.
yeah.
That's hey, when I go,
So
when I go,
that,
I mean,
fun.
to be sure.
Yeah.
Did you guys?
Yeah, no. We did classes together. I'm trying to remember exactly.
I manage it like, when I meet
Is that the only one?
I was like, oh, yeah, this is. I also
in I live in with my.
We had, this is.
Oh, really?
Do you remember?
So that's
Deanna
the key.
Elliott?
Because Facebook, I've never seen to be used for, and from
You know what you could do? Go look up my LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yeah, go look at my.
So, are you looking to?
Oh,
Yeah.
that's why
I'm actually looking, because I used to, I do a lot of nonprofit stuff, so I used to like the Women City Club, like HERS.
Yeah, I don't know. I-
So I'm actually looking at Rotary Club.
Oh, well, let me put this out here for you.
Okay, good.
So I'm on board with Yeah, what the youth fund is it actually trains.
Oh, I mean, if you're gonna like.
Actually, not through
Any online
appointments,
presence
but
at all,
only one
that's a
more,
good thing, but at the same time,
law,
I'm
they pass
kind
a
of
bar.
worried it's kind of turning.
Oh,
And
what's
then
the
they work up here.
They have this system where people can endorse you. Like for me, I don't know, I've got like public speaking and renewable energy, which is great, but there's $50,000
So
that
the
you should do.
peers represent,
And that's what, I've got a whole bunch of little things for that, but.
and actually go to trials and stuff like that, which is, you know, I mean, they could be shoplifting,
There are different people that do
underage
like.
all of that. And then they also do mediation as well. So,
Yeah.
my son's in the program, but I'm on
I don't
board.
even know you, I mean, it's like,
Desperately.
I'd like to do it like
looking
if
for
you see a business card, like I'm
desperately
a
looking for people
relationship or.
Yeah,
that
I would
understand.
business since you
Or I see the benefit, yeah.
Because it's
I
not
would love
profit,
to, I would do love to. The only thing is that I'm looking at,
It's good.
because I figure after I've been here for 6 months and the job starts to suck, like in the fall,
Right.
but I will love to be able to use, I love.
But we have a board of directors who is the chair, probably right around fall time.
Yeah.
And,
Oh.
what is it?
A living locket, I have this.
Yeah.
Shelley.
Seriously? That's so cool, where'd you get this?
There were actual attorneys.
Really?
and
They have a
judges.
sale today?
Really?
Really?
I don't
You
necessarily
can
think
mix and
I think that just
with
makes
the
good
city.
sense because.
My mother
If you ever
does
stuck
her,
in that
my
house,
mother
someone
There's
needs
a lot
to
of
fail.
interest.
No, I've done that before.
I would love to, because I had a really, I used to volunteer with the Pasadena Women's Club. So we were in charitable social clubs. What we did is our primary goal was to help raise money for high school kids that are predominantly in underserved communities. A lot of them are first time going to college and like helping support them. So things like that was like, yeah, I want to be able to give, and that's a piece, because like I said, I'm getting used to living in the house, getting used to a lot of things, so that's a figure. Work will hopefully settle down.
I have to say wishful thinking. Just
Whatever, I know everyone.
Like I say, I want to get to the one.
Well, for me, it's
Yeah.
so I think that's a part of it. Yeah. That's
Oh.
And
Yeah.
that's interesting because they are trying to really
You know, you have
concentrate on that.
presidents or whatever you're dealing with.
Oh. Well, you know, so one class is to take this.
I think, yeah, I think it's.
Costume.
You know, and so
Because you have to
trying
study
some of the
Yes.
characters that
So
were,
if you're gonna decide costumes for a period,
you know, getting
And
into
I don't
the
know what's the correct path,
fascinating.
but I know
Especially
other people are like, oh, I want to connect with you, I'm like, oh, I kind of.
That's where, I
Okay.
mean, for me, because I see some of these like young
About
girls,
16 to
it's
see.
just like, you just need
Yeah, I
to
suppose.
really
But, you know, you can see things.
Good to see you again.
There was,
Appropriate,
there
right?
was,
Costume
there was,
design.
and I love this.
Teacher actually worked on Star Wars, her department, like, I forgot what they call them, like the blinking lights and things that look like they're doing something, they're not.
Very late for that, you know, but, he actually designed actually, he went through mediation, and it was
Right now?
very.
How's your son?
He's,
This one?
he's
No, I
He's
mean,
been a mediator, a peer
oh,
mediator.
you're,
Yeah,
with the rest
that's
of
really-
right now?
That's really.
Oh, it is?
He's so.
You got that
That's
there?
really.
Okay.
But he defended this youth, and they sat with the,
Although I just got a tablet, I started.
what do they
reading
call them?
online.
It sounds horrible. I was like, what have I gotten into? He's learning all these horrible things, but.
No, I'm listening to you. I wanna put this up
The person
right
that
now.
had the crime,
Yeah.
committed against him, and the youth, the victim and the perpetrator.
Uh-huh.
And it ended up coming out that the kid had been living on the streets. His parents, very rough home life. The kid had been living on the streets. The vehicle was open. There was visible cash on, you know what I mean? So the kid got into the car and stole. They ended up going through a mediation where the person that he stole from stepped up and asked if he could mentor and work with the kid and be there for him, you know, and I was just like, wow, that's a powerful program.
That's
And
absolutely.
these kids are running it, you know. So, anyway, when
Yes,
you get
but
there, if you're interested.
I
you have
am.
time. We meet just once a month. You know, it's about an hour.
Yeah, I would say in the fall because right now it's like, I mean, I've only lived here like 5 months and then
Yeah.
I just need to get the kids through the summer and then we're trying to find a
Yes.
house.
How
And
many kids?
I have 2. Well, actually I have 3. I have a 6 and an 8.
Oh,
But my 22-year-old is on the East Coast. She goes to college there.
okay.
She goes to Rutgers.
Oh.
Yeah.
My family's in New York. I don't know how that is.
Yeah, she loves the East Coast.
Well, I enjoyed that. I'm Diana Campbell.
Nice to meet you, Diana Campbell.
Nice to meet you. I work at the Chamber supposed to do the
No,
public
I'm in-
relations. Get out.
But I've seen you around on
Really?
on Upper Campus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, yes, I work at the Jesus supposed to do the public
Nice to meet
relations.
you. Work with
I'm a translator.
Maybe.
So you
I translate science and English.
right.
That was my elevator speech.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
probably
Yeah.
it.
You work with Rob and Dave.
Yes, yes, I don't see them a lot.
I didn't see you work with
Yeah,
them.
but I work with
In
them
the virtual world.
on the same floor. And that's where I'm attorney. Bye.
Yeah.
You know what I kept the shut
Bye, okay, see you later.
Okay. I used to work over there years ago. Very, very long time ago. Yeah, city.
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's pretty. See you later, Rosemary.
Bye, see you later. Thank you. The person who's supposed to.
But I'm gonna be here for the second session. Oh, you're not gonna be here?
I got 3.
No, but are you gonna be having this?
Hi, I'm Rosemary Madnick.
Tom Munson.
Hi, Tom. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Janet. Nice to meet you, Janet. Thank you for.
You said you read the PowerPoint?
I do not run the power plant. You do not want me running the power plant. I was like, no. I'm actually the executive director of grants and contracts. You ran the guy in the corner. Yeah. That's not my personal brand. Because you're like, wait, that brand doesn't really match. We just had the session before this on personal branding. So how did you get up to?
I think.
You think?
Like most men, I was following a girl.
I didn't know that, but
It's
okay.
very common.
Oh, really?
Here she's not.
So is your family still in LA?
My sister is. They both are teachers.
Nice. That's cool. I wasn't following anyone. I just came up.
And I knew that I should have left that lunch earlier. I got here just 2 minutes late to the last session, and
It's okay.
little things like there was an introduction, and I came in mid presentation. So hi, I'm so and so, and right after that, first impression, well, he's late. I'm like, oh.
Oh no, don't even worry about it. Seriously.
In fact, that's the reason why I always try to choose a forward seat as much as possible. Maintain my visibility.
Walked out.
You worked in the university for 17 years?
Yeah.
Oh, hey.
I've been to the university now for almost a year. But I've been a student here. I've worked here previously. I figured I'd work at the Evans Services Building on College Road.
Oh, you work there? That's where my boss is.
You said computer store
Oh.
years ago, just across from HR. It used to be I think it's not one, two or three separate offices. It used to be just one. And that was a computer store. It was an awkward place, but some of the people that I worked with, they would see me. I'm Michelle.
So when you followed the girl, did you stay with the girl? Or did it work out?
We stayed for years and got married, but.
Okay, so you did.
Yeah, we went to, but I enjoyed it. It suits me so well. I don't see myself holding it anytime soon.
Well, I
Who knows?
me for
That's good. No, it was just perfect. Right.
Thank you. Yeah. It's still broadcasting, so it'll be fine.
It is?
Yeah.
Conversations?
Yeah. We didn't put a pause between y'all, and since we knew you were going to be here.
You should have put a pause, because I was like, you're hearing my conversations? It's at 1:45?
Yep. In a minute.
I think I is it up. I'll go to the first.
There we go.
Want to make sure everyone is in the right session. Successful managing and mentoring, keeping the best and brightest in tough times. Okay, I guess if you didn't respond, I assume you're all supposed to be here.
So which one did you say?
I think it's that one.
The
Nope, it's probably the first one.
mentor.
Yes.
Okay, there it goes. It's right here. And it's all yours.
Cool. We're ready to go.
Yep.
So it's 1:45, and thank you for coming to the presentation. My name is Rosemary Madnick, and I'm the Executive Director of Grants and Contracts Administration. And I want to make sure everyone is in the right session. Successful managing and mentoring, keeping the best and brightest in tough times. So are we all okay? Cool. So one of the things I wanted to kind of get a quick pulse, how many of you are looking to be mentors? Come on, raise your hands. How many are looking to be a mentee? And how many of you just don't really know what you wanted to be here for. Good, okay, thanks. Hey, we have to have honesty here. Okay. Oops. Let's go back. So a part of mentoring is whether you are on the mentee side or whether you're on the mentoring side. A lot of this is if you are a mentee, you want someone who's going to motivate you. You want someone who's going to lead by example. You want someone who's going to coach you. If you want somebody who's going to inspire you. If you are a mentor, it's the same thing. You want to motivate, you want to lead, you want to coach, you want to inspire, and you want to help your mentee provide a vision for them. How many of you have ever mentored someone before? Good. And can I ask you under what circumstances were you the mentor?
I was the mentor and it was a new employee.
Oh, okay, very nice.
Big brother, big sister.
Okay, so yours was job related, and then yours was just a mentoring for like a big brother. Awesome. So of course, once again, mentoring is really a trusted counselor or guide. And what the Cleveland mental health system defines a mentor as, and this is what I thought was really interesting, that's why I brought this up here. It's a wise, loyal advisor or coach. So what does it take to be a mentor? So what it takes to be a mentor is you have to be on that same level. You have to have a level of commitment and confidence in your own abilities to to be a mentor. And also, too, really important, you have to be interested in someone else's growth. If you are not interested in anyone's growth, you shouldn't be a mentor. It takes a lot of time and hard work in order to be a mentor because it really is a time commitment. So one of the things I'm going to challenge for those of you who want to be a mentor and continue along, for those of you who have been mentors, continue along that mentoring path is to kind of decide what kind of mentor do you envision yourself to be? Are you nurturing? Are you looking for someone? Are you looking to be a career coach? Because a career coach is like something that you just did. I'm just there for the job. That's all I'm doing. Are you looking to be a mentor for somebody for job development? Someone who will help you grow? Are you just looking for someone like a skills coach to be a mentoring? Like, for example, you want to know something about grants and contracts, or you just want a person just to be able to teach you that? Are you looking for a mentor are you the type of mentor who wants to be a correspondent? Hey, I'm here for you to share your ideas with. Or are you looking to be a technical advisor type of mentor, someone with whom you can discuss your technical ideas with? So a lot of that is, once again, it's just kind of defining what is it you want to be a mentor. And then really important is also what's your motivation for being a mentor? So for those of you who were mentors before, what was your motivation?
Mine?
Yes.
I was also responsible for coming back and fixing the problems that the new employee created on his own. So my motivation was purely self-serving in making sure they did the job right the first time.
Okay.
So, I mean, at that point, then you take a real sincere interest in how they're learning and how they're doing their job.
Okay. And for you, you worked with Big Brothers,
I guess I just thought it'd be a fun way to give back.
Okay, see, two totally different motivations. So you have to decide what motivates you. So as you can see, who becomes a mentor, why you do it, it's really, the answers are varied. And some of us, I mean, I was lucky enough to really have a really amazing mentor who really took me under his wing at a very young age, and who was really interested in helping me to grow professionally. So that was my mentoring relationship, was really on a professional development basis. Another thing too is I've also had a mentor out in the community, because I've served on several boards of directors. So I needed someone, especially being years back a new board member, I needed someone to help me with trying to be a board member in the community, and something that I have done. So for those of you who are looking to be a mentor, what are some of your motivations for mentoring?
I work at the University Museum. We have student employees, and student employees, they come and go pretty quickly, and some of them are new. They haven't really had a good job. You know, they may have worked behind a counter at McDonald's, or you know, some summer thing that doesn't really involve good customer service. And so I want to bring them along and teach them how to do this job well, and that the things I can teach them will translate into the rest of their life and the rest of the job that they have in their life.
So your motivation is really the same thing for professional development, motivation to really help someone along. Okay. Anyone else want to volunteer? Yes.
Well, for me, I've been mentored well, and I've been not mentored, and I know which one of those is a more pleasant experience. And as a supervisor, I think that you give more as an employee and potentially as a person when you're mentored well, and so I want people to have more of that experience than the latter.
It's really nice being on a university campus, because I think that's probably one of the easiest places for those of you looking to be a mentor to try and find a mentor, especially with when you have some students coming in. A lot of times it's their first time with a job. And one of the things that is really important is, like, you're there to be a guide to help them along. So one of the things I like to do with some of the folks that I like to mentor as a mentor is I do strength-based leadership in my office. So what I do is, as a mentor, I have them read this book called Strength Finders 2.0. So they take this assessment, and out of that assessment comes out of your 5 big strengths. So based on those strengths, that's how I mentor my students along. I've only been at UAF for 5 months, so I haven't had a chance to do it, but I use that same technique with a lot of my staff. And it's really nice, because then you set the path for them. And a lot of when it comes to mentoring, especially the young students, is sitting, and a lot of it takes time, is as a mentor sitting down with them and helping them come up with, like, what is their year plan? What is it they want to accomplish after that year? So part of mentoring isn't just being there speaking to someone, but it's also listening to them and helping them come up with some things that are tangible and meaningful for them to help them along their career path. But that's a part of the dialogue. So it's really keeping engaged and keeping them engaged. So do you have any techniques for keeping some of your mentees engaged, mentors, that you could share?
I was going to say, from my side of things, I typically strike up conversations with them that weren't necessarily work-related, to find out more about them, what their interests were, and things that I could use to relate to them when I was mentoring them in a fashion that they would be able to easily comprehend, rather than trying to come up with an obscure reference of some sort. Once I kind of got the gist of that, it was easier to work with them and move them along towards getting the right motivation, so that they continued on with what they wanted to do. So if they come up and they said, well, I'm not sure if I want to do this or not, it's like, okay, well, let's get you started on this subset, and then figure out where your passion lies.
Another tool that you can use too, I've come up with, and I'll be happy to pass this along, is a sheet that says, what are your milestones that you want to accomplish during our mentoring relationship, and what are some objectives? And my goal is to help you accomplish it. So that's another way to help guide your mentees along. So the role of a mentor, like I said, you have to really decide if you want to be one. And being a mentor, you can't just do it like an hour a day. Sometimes it might take 2 hours a day, or sometimes it might take an hour a week. But it's really important that as a role of a mentor, you have to clarify the person's career goals and carry out a plan to reach those goals by sharing some insights and knowledge that you have gained through your experience. So you think of a mentor as a learning leader who facilitates a learning progress rather than a guru who just passes down the word. So it's very, very interactive. So, being a mentor, like I said, it takes a lot of time. Sometimes it's not, you find yourself in a predicament where it's not just about the career, but you also find yourself being a parent. You also find yourself being a relationship guide. But that's the thing with being a mentor. You have to know what your boundaries are. And sometimes it's like you're there to listen, especially if it comes to, let's say, the tendency where it might, so to speak, bleed over into being a relationship or a personal counselor to folks. But you also, as a mentor, have to know when to steer that person back or when to steer them into other avenues that are best suited for them. Like it's like, well, I think you really need counseling right now. So that's really is a fine line of a mentor, is really understanding the boundaries. And then also to conveying that to your mentee. Another thing that's really important as a role of a mentor is complete honesty, and then letting your mentee know that, say, there are times that we're talking about your career path, and I may not agree with like your career path or where you want to go. You have to be able to give constructive criticism, but also to do it in such a way where you're not tearing down the person. So that's another fine line. Another thing too that's really important of being a mentor is just trying to stay positive when you can, and if a situation, you have to say something negative, try and say it a little nicer. So it's kind of knowing your boundaries of your communication. So once again, I mean, we all provide guidance based on our past experience. That's why your mentee might seek you out. So for those of you who are interested in getting a mentor, it's really look at the person who you are seeking to mentor you. Do they have the experience to really mentor you as a person? Another thing too is just create an open line of communication and say, I'm going to be completely honest with you. Sometimes I may not agree with you, but as my job as a mentor, I'm going to give you the best possible advice that I can in your career path. Another thing too is that it's a very fine line with being with the mentor and mentee, is that the mentor is not there to tell, it's like, this is what you should be doing, X, Y, and Z. You're there to really help your mentee come up with the solution. So it's almost like you're facilitating it, because then you become in some ways, like the parent-child role, and you don't want to always have your mentee come to you and say, okay, what should I be doing right now? Because an ultimate test of a really good mentee-mentor relationship is you want that person, based on you mentoring them, to be able to go into the real world and be able to come up with their own things, but yet come back to you for advice. So that goes back to the first slide, is that as a mentor, you're a trusted advisor. You're not someone who's, okay, I'm going to go to you for every single problem. I expect an answer right then and there. So and that goes back to, you lead them through the problem-solving process. You offer that constructive feedback in a supporting way. Once again, going back to sharing your experience, share stories, include your mistakes, because as a mentor, it's another important point that they view you as someone who's real, and you could say, you know, I went down this path, and this was the cause and effect of it, and this is why I don't recommend going down this path. Real life experiences are invaluable with that relationship. One of the things that I think a lot of people tend not to do, and this is really important, is that when you're out with your mentor, with your mentee, introduce them in your social circles, introduce them, network with them. Say, Ramon, here is my, Ramon is a colleague of mine. He's interested in doing X, Y, and Z. You know of a person in another department, introduce them together. Get them out networking and linking, because that's why they've come to you, because of your experiences, who you know, what you can't offer. So why don't you introduce your mentee and bring them aboard? One of the things that I do in my professional association is when I have a mentee, I actually have them start to do presentations with me, because that's another way to bring them up through the pipeline, and it's a great way for them to shadow you. Once again, be really honest about your experience of what you've gone through. It's like, well, this didn't work, and if I had to do it all over again, I would not have gone this path. And another thing too, the mentor-mentee relationship is a two-way street. So always make sure you are constantly soliciting some feedback from your mentee. It's like, how am I doing? Should I slow down? Is there other things that you would like for me to, for us to discuss? And then come prepared to each meeting to discuss issues. I belong, in my professional association, we actually have a mentor-mentee program that we really grow the research administrators up through the pipeline. So my mentee can be from Oregon. It can be someone from a university in Texas, a university in New York. But one of the things I task my mentee to come up with is an agenda. Because then that way we're just not there wasting valuable time, because my mentee's time is just as important as my time, and I want to make sure that that half an hour we spend together, or 45 minutes or an hour, is really well, it's valued. So every time, as much as possible, coming prepared. And initially, realistically, is in the beginning, with any new mentor-mentee relationship, it's important that you set some sort of schedule, rather than for it to just grow organically and say, okay, by the way, you know, we'll meet on Friday, so what do you want to talk about? So I think initially it's really important as a mentor to get your mentee to just come up with a schedule, coming up with preparing, and you as a mentor can go ahead and fill in the blanks. And then once you start to establish your relationship, then this will naturally go away slowly, and then you'll begin to, your conversations will come up a lot more organically. Any questions?
I have a question. You mentioned some of your mentors would be to this place or this other.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean they're not going to be from the same company, the same organization? They would be.
I belong to an organization called the National Council of University Research Administrators. So a part of, we all belong to our professional association. So part of my professional association is that the mentees apply to this program, we call it Lead Me, and they are linked with someone who's senior in the field, and they are matched based on their particular interest. So depending on the interest, they can be from anywhere in the United States. And usually the mentoring relationship is a year. But that's the formal relationship. But then after that year, you really get to know a lot of, you get to know your mentees, and then you then begin to establish your relationship, where then they start to come back to you for advice and things like that. I know that UAF was thinking of starting a mentoring-mentee program here, and I think that would be really great to help grow a lot of the new administrators on campus, but then match them up with senior administrators. But the key is that it needs to be a match. And I've been, because I also oversee this particular program, one of the things that's really interesting was last year there was a mentor-mentee relationship that did not work out. For some reason, these two just cannot jive and gel together. So what we had done as mentors was recognizing that, you know, you can't, oil and water just aren't going to mix either way it goes. But it was really important to preserve that mentoring environment. So what we ended up doing was switching the mentee to someone else that was better suited. Because you can be, it's like a dating thing. You can be perfectly matched on paper, and then in person, it's like, oh my God, this is not what I had, you know, and had in mind. So personalities does make, you know, make a difference. But once again, being honest and say, well, this is just isn't a match. I just don't think we're jiving together. And say, you know what, you're absolutely right. But let's try and see if we can just match you with someone else that you feel a lot more comfortable with. So one of the do's with mentoring is, we talked about earlier, be clear about your motives for helping your mentee. If you're not sure of yourself, the mentee will get mixed signals from you. So it's really important just to be very, very clear, because you may not say anything, but your motivations end up coming out. And once again, it's like you as the mentor, you have, that person is coming to you, it's built on trust, and you can really mess with someone's career if your motivations aren't really genuine and authentic. So it's really, really think about your motivations of why you want to do it. Is it really to help someone, or is it just because it's going to look good on paper? So if it's just going to look good on paper, that relationship is not going to work out, because then that mentee is just going to be at a disservice, because all the person is trying to do is just notch out some things. Once again, look after your mentee's needs, but consider your own as well. Be certain about what you want from the relationship and what you're willing to give. So once again, when you sit down with your mentee, it's like, well, I can't give you 8 hours a week, but what I can give you is I can give you two hours a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So once again, going back to look after your mentee's needs, try and figure out what your mentee wants, and then come up with the plan on what you're willing to give. Another thing too is that it's really, you have to prepare for the relationship to end. Sometimes with being a mentor, it's not like marriage where it's going to go on and on and on forever. There's going to come to a time where your mentee needs to transition to another phase in their life. It doesn't mean that that's it, I can't talk to you anymore, but it just means that it's recognizing that your mentee has outgrown the relationship, or perhaps that mentee needs to be passed on to another phase of, passed on to another mentor who's able to meet the mentee's needs. So the successful mentee-mentor cycle requires the mentee move on, and the relationship either ends or takes a different form. But going into that is you have to be really cognizant of that, because yes, you share a lot together, but you have to also know that, okay, the formal relationship has ended. I could still be, you can still come to me for different things, but it's time to, move on. So let's talk about the don'ts of mentoring. Don't give up right away if your mentee resists your help at first. They may not recognize the value of what you want to offer. Persistence to a point may help. So that's why I said in the beginning, it's really sitting down and being honest about what you want to get out of the relationship. So part of that, it's like I said, what I do as a guide is I say, let's sit down. What are some things you want to accomplish? And then what are some of the objectives? And that becomes your agenda, so to speak. And that helps a lot. Don't force your mentee to follow your footsteps, because you know what? As much as it's nice to have someone who thinks like you and acts like you. You don't want that. You absolutely don't. You want someone to be very, very independent, to be their own thinker, and not to be a clone of you. So that's something that as a mentor you have to be very careful that it was your career path, but it may not necessarily be the career path of your mentee. Once again, your experiences are supposed to enhance it, not take the form of your, not cloning you're not cloning yourself. And then, and this is it, don't have a preconceived plan for the final outcome of your relationship. So don't go into it saying, I expect, X, Y, and Z to happen. If it doesn't happen, then it's not successful. A part of mentoring is that it eventually evolves into this organic experience. What does it take to be a good mentor? And I'm sorry this was not coming out as, can you see it back there? Okay. What I'm going to do is if you just sign in later, I'll go ahead and email you the slides. So another thing, too, that makes a really good mentor, and for those of you who are looking for mentors, is you really want, when you look for a mentor, you want somebody who has like the street credibility, someone who can demonstrate leadership competencies and values. So you want someone who can demonstrate that, who stays on top of their field, who's very, very well respected. You want someone with solid and superior achievement. If you have somebody who doesn't even stay on top of their field, why would you want to be mentored by them? Another thing, too, is that for a mentor, you want to be able to set high standards for yourself, because that's essentially why someone is seeking you out, because you have a lot of these qualifications that they're looking for. So a lot of this has to do with, like, this mentoring has to primarily do with around your job and your career. Once again, staying updated in your field. Do you present a lot? Do you write a lot in your field? Do you recognize excellence in others and encourage it? So you might be looking at someone who's just great in this field, but if they don't encourage other people, why would you want to be mentored by them? They can be this amazing person. So you see how you have that really fine line. You want, as a mentor, someone who can enjoy intellectual engagement and help others. Because one of the things, too, for those of you who are interested in looking for a mentor, someone can be this amazing person. Not everyone wants to mentor. Some people just want to stay there. So you have to be very cognizant of that as well. So be sensitive to the needs of others, and then exercise good judgment decisions. Because if you, once again, you are looking for a mentor who can't even exercise their good judgment, why would you want to go seek them out? And then vice versa, if someone is looking to you, it's like, wow, Ramon, just because I know Ramon's name because he was in my other session. Wow, Ramon's been really good. Every time I watch him and look at him, he's very, very well respected, the way he treats other people, because the way you treat other people is most likely how your mentor is going to treat you. So, so like I said earlier, it's like being a mentor is really acting as a counselor. So a part of, counseling and helping them is you have active listening. You don't pass judgment. You make your mentee feel comfortable and ease. You really are genuine in their interest, and then if sometimes a mentee might be very, very quiet. So part of that is just getting them to feel very comfortable and open up with you. So once again, there's just different things that we have here. You have workplace activities, you have on-the-job activities, and then you have off-the-job activities. So mentoring someone isn't necessarily sitting in a room with them and saying, okay, what are we going to talk about today? A part of like what I've done with some of my mentors, if I'm on a committee meeting, of course, depending on the committee meeting, I might have them come with me to the committee meeting and help shadow me. That's a great opportunity for on-the-job activities. You might want to have them sit with you while you might meet with different folks. So we call that just mirroring right now, job shadowing. You might go off campus and say, hey, why don't we, like one of my mentors was, I came from Los Angeles, so one of my mentors happened to be in the Los Angeles area. So what we ended up doing was going to another university within the Los Angeles area. So that was another way to bring in your mentee, is to go do off-site visits, to say, yeah, this is what I do, but yet this is someone else in the same field who does something a little bit different, rather than me, telling them about it or discussing it with, this is something else. What we do too is we do a lot with, I read Harvard Business Review, so what I might do is to send them relevant articles just out of the blue. Those articles may not be during our scheduled time. It's like, hey, I was reading this weekend. I thought that this would be really relevant to what you're doing. Once again, participating in professional associations. A lot of times with professional associations, especially depending on what field you're in, they might have a student membership. What a great opportunity if your mentee is interested in your field to say, hey, this would be a great membership opportunity for you. Now it's opened up all these doors. And another thing too is community service is always really helpful. So once again, we have to ask ourselves, what is it you value most from your mentoring relationship? And this is a question that you can ask your mentee, maybe about at the quarter mark, halfway mark. What do you value from this? Is this working for you? Should we continue with a mentoring relationship? Maybe your mentee is having trouble deciding if they want to continue or not, but asking them the question, do you want to continue? Is it working? Is there anything that we should change? Remember I told you earlier I have like a little agreement, a little template. It's like, is there anything you need to change? Are your milestones okay? Do we need to change some of your objectives? And do you think our relationship will be different in 6 months from now? Where do you see this going? So these are just some of the questions that you can ask during that relationship or the meetings. So another thing is, for those of you who are looking for a mentor, it's how do you identify the right mentor for you? So a lot of times you might, it might be through a friend of yours, it might be through colleagues, it might be someone that you've met at work, it might be someone that you've been on a committee with, or maybe it's someone that you've just seen across campus and heard their name and you're like, God, I would love that person to mentor me. Another thing too, you might look for someone who's in the same field as you are and you say, I want to go ahead and be mentored by this person because they've got the industry knowledge. You might looking for someone to help mentor you with some of your management skills. So you say, I want to be managed by, let's say, the Vice Chancellor for Administrative Services because of her, management skills. I want to be mentored by someone in the library because this person has just amazing communication skills and I could really learn a lot from them. Another thing too, when you look for a mentor, is I think as a mentee, what helps you with selecting your mentor is finding out what are some of your goals. Because when you sit down and do some soul searching, and you say, well, in a year, 3 years, 5 years, this is where I want to go with my career. These are some of the goals that I would like to have. It makes it easier for you to help find a mentor, because then what you've identified is then matched with the person that could help fill those particular needs. Another thing too is, does this person exhibit problem-solving skills, or does this person like to pontificate all the time? You want someone who just doesn't sit there and talks, but says, you know what, I really like the way this person solves some of the problems that may come up. Another thing too that we talked about just briefly is that it's a very fine line, is that sometimes as a mentor, you might have to also deal with psychosocial support for family pressures and coping with disappointment or maybe self-esteem. But you have to know what your boundaries are, what you're able to take on and what you're not. And most people are not, family counselors and able to deal with this. So it's really is knowing when to say, I can't take this on, but I can help refer you. But this inevitably might creep in depending on your mentee. So another thing too is that create an outreach plan to find your mentor. Like I said, I think UIF is in the process of creating a mentoring program, because it's something that was mentioned earlier and a lot of people could really benefit from it. Identify and approach a senior leader, someone that you have watched, you really like what they do, and you think that they would be the right mentor for you. Another thing too is that you may not find your mentor here on campus, but maybe there's someone out in the community that maybe is the head of Rotary Club who would be a really good mentor. So really think outside of your boundaries. Mentoring isn't necessarily within your own little circle. Sometimes, like I said, you can find your mentor maybe not within the same state. Maybe there's someone that you've admired from outside of the state. Depending on your area that you're in, sometimes your professional association may have a mentoring program there. Social media is another great way to look for mentors. Primarily, if you're looking for job skills mentoring, that might be a good place. And another thing too, if you've come from somewhere else, you might want to look at your past employer. Now that you don't have that employee-employer relationship, that person might be willing to take you on as a mentor, but because you were an employee-employer, it was not appropriate. So don't disregard that either as another possible source for finding a right mentor. So can you think of any other places that you might look for a mentor? Because the gentleman in the back said he looked for, the Boys and Girls Club. That's this. You guys are so quiet. So another thing too is that it's like with anything, it's really hard to make the first move. But ultimately, this part is really in the mentee's hands, because it's very awkward for a person to, hi, I'm a mentor, can I mentor you? And it's like, no, you can't. But really it's the mentee is the one who's really is driving that relationship. So once again, you contact the person via phone, email me, send a letter, whatever works for you. Include in your introduction why you think this person would make a good mentor, what you expect out of it, and the benefits. But what's really, it's follow up, and follow up. Another thing too is that you may have two mentors depending on what you want out of the relationship. You might say, well, I want to be able to, let's say grants and contracts, because I'm in grants and contracts. I want someone who's really strong in pre-award, and I want somebody strong in post-award, but you may not find that one person who can fit both. So then you can have two different mentors. But once again, it goes back to defining what you want defining what you want from your mentor and coming up with at least a preliminary set of, your goals and what you want out of it. And that's it. Are there any questions? Yes.
Just asking someone, oh, Mr. So-and-so, I would love to be your mentee. I would expect the response to be, don't bother me again. That would be.
No, a lot of it's how you approach the situation. I mean, I always say it's really important to be really honest with folks. So part of that you can say, I know this might be really awkward, but I really want to be able to grow in this particular field. Would you mind if I come and talk to you for a little bit? So just talking with the person for a little bit, then you can start to gauge whether they are a lot more receptive. But I mean, yeah. So there's just different ways. Some people, depending on their personality, if they're like in the Myers-Briggs, if they're like a big E, then you can say, I want you to become my mentor. But certain people, you have to take that relationship really kind of slowly, because you don't want to be on the verge of appearing like you're stalking them either. Yes?
So in your talk, you sort of looked at the mentor-mentee relationship as being very concrete, but it seems like if you're a supervisor, a lot of times you're sort of mentoring people in a less intense sort of way, but as a good supervisor, I think that seems like sort of good. I mean, so do you see that as like a really separate phenomenon, or do you see that as like, do you care to comment?
When I supervise now a staff, I would not call it mentoring, because we think with mentoring, it's a very open relationship with someone. You can be very, very 100% honest in their career path. You can't do that with your employees, you see. So that's why you have to be very good. You can be there to nurture them and to guide them in what they do according, HR says, you were hired to do this job. That's the job you do. In mentoring, it's like, well, this is your job now, but this is what you could do. You see? So it's a very fine line. In your job, you, as a supervisor, I wouldn't tell someone, it's like, well, you really shouldn't be in this job. I would be in HR in 2 seconds, in 2 seconds. But as a mentor, I can tell my mentee that, because I don't have that employer-employee relationship. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I guess you're sort of defining them as being very different. I guess I sort of think of them as being sort of more. I think that they're sort of like. Well, first of all, I've been to grad school. So you go to grad school, you have this supervisor relationship where you're definitely, at least to some extent.
I keep them very separate, because to me, mentoring is. It's not forced. Mentoring cannot be forced. So if someone comes up to you and says, I want to be mentored by you, then you can do it. You can't do that with an employee. You can't force yourself. They have to be willing to accept it. But there's ways that you could, like I said, I wouldn't call it mentoring, but there's ways that you could guide them to make them the best employee in what they do. But I think because of the relationship, you can't make career decisions for them.
I kind of thought that the university's idea of like sort of career ladders and like investing in the employee, that was all sort of like part of the whole mentoring idea.
You asked my opinion. I nurture my employees, but the way I do it is like, for example, I went through with being new to UAF, I completely did some restructuring. So what I did was I looked at their jobs and said, well, they're not where they should be. So that's a way of like helping them grow up the career ladder. But I can't say, well, you're going to be in my office for 3 years, and after that you're going to move over to GI, and then from here you're going to do this. You can't do that because of that employee-employer relationship. But what you can say is that in your job, these are the things that you need to do really well. It's like, oh, you need to take advanced Excel. I need to make sure that you do this so you can do your job really well, because my job, is to make sure that they do their job well. And at the end of the 1 year period or whatever, you evaluate them and say, did you do your job the way you're supposed to do your job? Because you're hired for, you hire them to do a job. So, I mean, there's ways, still to answer your question, huh?
Well, I guess working in the environments that I've worked in, like I work at the library here, and I was a grad student, right? So as a grad student, to a certain extent, you work for your supervisor, which might or might not be a good relationship, and you'll have more than one supervisor, but they'll be guiding you. It's a very loose relationship. I work in the library, but still, I supervise student employees, but and I've worked there as an employee for 14 years, and my job has changed an enormous amount based on both technology and based on the things that I was interested in. So, and the things that the library was interested in me doing. So the idea that my job defined is like so narrow, it just doesn't seem to work for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it like your job is narrow, but it's just giving them, like for example, with my staff, it's like, here is your job, this is what you do. But I also say, okay, well, here are some committees that you can join. But like I said, I won't call it mentoring because I don't consider it mentoring. I consider that growing them being the best in their particular job that they do.
Yeah, so like it's employee development.
Yeah.
Yeah, and setting up a framework so that they can develop within their career, and almost in a way setting it up so that they could maybe actually have an actual mentor, and the mentor can help them do something that's real. So I think there is a natural limit to what, as a supervisor, what you can. I hear what you're saying, and that there is kind of a cap as a supervisor, because at some point in time you're no longer a disinterested party in their future.
What I do for my staff is that they know I do this mentoring with my professional organization. I say, I can't mentor you. You will not you would not have that experience. So if they're interested, I say, I can match you up with someone else who's better suited. Because I just think that relationship, it needs to be kept separate because they work for you. Yeah, you have to, I know it's still there because your look is telling me, Yes.
I guess it's just primarily influenced by movies, but when I think of mentor-mentee, I think of police officers, the rookie cop and the veteran cop. Is that a mentor-mentee relationship, or?
It could be depending, but I think that's more, maybe it's just for them to learn the ropes to be that. But when I think of mentor, I think of like you're the whole, managing their career outside of the, environment. I mean, like for me, I like to tell you, I mentor the students, but I think the students are a little bit easier because I don't have that relationship with them. The students that I had mentored, they didn't work for me. They were there primarily they were there for an internship. But my goal was to make sure that they were mentored, and then that way they can be out in the real world with real life, experiences, and get them what they need, This is good. Keep going.
I'm sorry if you mentioned this before I was able to get here, but
No worries.
in your experience, what's been kind of an appropriate frequency to make sure that things happen? How frequently should one meet?
Well,
How to kind of not lag, but not be overbearing. I know it's unique to every case, but just in your experience.
Initially, it takes a lot of time, and that's because I think of like your initial stages of mentoring is like dating, where it's a lot of questions, it's a lot of asking about what you do. So I think initially you might spend several hours a week, and then eventually that will begin to taper off to like once a month, depending on what you need the person for. So my mentees for that one-year program, probably for the first 3 months, we meet twice a week for half an hour, because that's not overbearing, because you don't want it to be overbearing. And then it just begins to taper off a little bit. Anything else? Any more questions? Any other questions?
How in your situation, how do you go about matching mentors, which is like similar interests, or you mentioned that sometimes, even though they do have similar interests, you know, really, so are they in the same location?
Not necessarily. Okay. When I've done my mentor-mentee program, it's specifically in my field of research administration. It's from all over the U.S. So initially, it's the matching on paper. Okay. It's the matching on paper. And then the situation that I had mentioned where there wasn't a relationship, it was just something with the personalities. And you can't judge personalities on paper. Yeah. But initially, that's the first match it's that paper match together. Yeah. Like I said, everyone's got different personalities, and sometimes it just doesn't work. You're like, there's just something about the vibe that it just doesn't mesh. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yes.
Looking at some of the forms that you had up there, were those forms you created, or did you?
I actually have
those from a book or a website or something.
I used a combination of things. This presentation I actually presented with my colleague in California for our professional association. It's primarily focused around mentoring of research administrators, but I do have some things I've used for mentoring. Like I said, the form, which is here's your milestones, here's your objectives, and because it's like, what is it you want to get out of the relationship after a year? And I don't want to, at least I don't want to be in a position where it's like, okay, let's just talk about it, but I want to have an idea that I'm making sure that I get everything the mentee needs, and I'm not wasting the mentee's time. So that's a really nice way to help with the relationship. But this one is strictly how to grow in the field of research administration. My current mentees from UC California, Irvine. Yeah, so they're from all over. That's a great, like I said, it's putting it out there. But our way this was set up was, it was done by an application process where they match you up. So I'm in my 4th year of mentoring. 4th year. And then I've mentored students through a school in Los Angeles that they were undergraduates. They were health administration majors, so they were in my office for 2 semesters. So that was another set of students I helped mentor. Anything else? Yes.
You mentioned there was a assessment or some sort of quiz that.
I do strength finders.
Yes.
So if you sign your thing, I'll send you the link. Every place I start, I always give that book out. So when you go down to grants and contracts, you'll have everyone on their cubicle has their 5 strengths there. And it's a great tool because for helping people to communicate with other folks. Because so many times you go into a place and people are like, you have to be good at this, you have to be good at that, and you may never ever be good at it because that's not where your strengths are. So that's why I said I run a strength-based program. So first thing I did is everyone take this assessment, and then you can kind of figure out where people's strengths are and things like that. It's actually really kind of fun. It's a great icebreaker for folks. Yeah, so when we do projects, it's all based on strengths. So you have a project, and you say, for this project, what kinds of strengths do you need? Well, I need someone who's analytical. I need someone who's strategic. I need someone who's deliberative. And then you identify the strengths that you need for that particular project, and then that's what brings it in, rather than you saying, well, I need Jane, Mary, or whomever to come in, and you really get a, because people think differently. But if you put your name down, be sure to send it to you. Yeah. But it's pretty cool. I've been in this strengths base since 2008. Yeah. And the books, I mean, you can get it at Barnes and Noble. So every new employee that comes through the office, even like some of our students, that's the first thing I do. It's like, here, welcome to our office. Here's your gift. Take your assessment so we can tell. Yeah, it's been really good. So we're right at where we should be for the class. So once again, thank you very, very much. Really appreciate you coming here, and have a great rest of the afternoon.
Thank you.
Doing good. That was great. Thanks. You do. Oh, yeah. Very good thing about that, actually.
This is like a really cool thing they do for the staff.
Yeah, it's the first time I've ever done it.
Me too.
I've worked here for 14 years.
Wow.
It's the first time I've ever done it.
Okay, I gotta ask you then, what was the trigger for you doing this afternoon?
I got back, I was really stressed out and took a trip, got back from the trip, and had so many loose ends that I had tied up that I was at a point where I was about to embark on the next series of this and that and the other, and it just happened to be in a momentary lull. It's like, oh, look again. I also signed up for intro to hip hop. Took that off. But this one I was kind of interested in. Yeah, I skipped everything except for this one.
And it's really cool that you've recognized them. Do something for me.
Yeah.
After 14 years, and not.
I feel really guilty normally. And I think I must have just been banned or just like realized that it's just a job and stressing out, you need to calm down and take a few minutes.
I think it's really nice that the university recognizes.
Yeah.
They encourage it.
Yeah. Right, right. So my full intention was this class, the hip hop, and the health biometric screening. That might have been it because of the potential of $1,200
savings.
Yeah. If you sign up for the Healthy Roads business and get all your numbers done. So I came down here to get all my numbers done. Apparently that's just this morning only. So I missed it. I got to come down here and go for a walk and be with you. So that's important. So, yeah. But I think that's about it. Otherwise, everybody else I know said, I'm too busy, I'm too busy, I'm too busy.
You had some really interesting classes. I was like the hip hop. Oh my God.
I really wanted to do that.
And I saw someone on the shuttle who did the yoga. I'm like, where are you going? I'm going to do the yoga. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, the yoga one and the Tai Chi or the Qigong were already closed. So, yeah, and then I let the work take over the hip hop class. But this one might be a little. And I figured instead of 45 minutes of learning cool things, you know.
Hip hop. Like,
right.
Oh, the music's starting.
At least walking to and from camp, upper camp.
Is that your book?
Yes.
Oh, I just didn't notice. I just said your book.
Yeah.
What is it?
Actually, it's about it. The Handbook of Chemistry and Physics.
Like reading.
It's a really old book, actually.
Yeah.
From 58.
Are you reading
Yeah,
it from cover to cover?
Not yet. But
It's
I
a
don't know.
really cool size.
I like it.
That's what grabbed my attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, just full of math and science.
Are you a math and science major? Oh. But it was just a cool looking book.
Yeah, cool looking book.
Good doorstop.
Very.
I was actually thinking that what you can do is like glue all the pages together and then kind of the center. Make a really cool shape.
That would make
Yeah.
Because most books these days are, that big, and you can't do that.
Yeah, I saw that on Pinterest.
Yeah, make a safe on your iPad.
Oh, that's because I mean I've seen those books or that concept before, but I never did it.
Glue it and then you cut it. I think it's,
I like to do that.
imagine the student taking this, I'm going to take this and read it.
So what's the
58 to 59.
I almost was always the dad
My dad.
First, 1914.
Oh, so maybe we can actually do something.
1914. Yeah, this is the 40th.
We have one of those at
The
home.
40th edition.
We have one of those
Shoot.
at home, so-
Yeah, the last one was 1958. So we can see it.
Yeah.
For those of you who just didn't get the right editions.
Yeah.
What time does this one start? 3 o'clock?
3 o'clock.
Let's do it.
Get over there for that ice cream in an hour.
Hi, welcome to Using Training Effectively, the Importance of Onboarding. My name is Rosemary Madnick, and I am the Executive Director of the Office of Grants and Contracts Administration. And I would just like to personally thank everyone out in the virtual world and all the folks here in person. I'd just like to thank you all for everything that you do as staff members to help support the university. I want you to know it's very well appreciated, very much appreciated. So the things we're going to go over today is how to identify, how to identify essential training requirements for onboarding, how to decide on the needs and goals, and tools for creating a training program, and how to support the learning experience. One of the things I want to preface is that this is not how to, like, you have onboarding when you come aboard as a new employee, like there's certain things you have to do through HR. This is only used as a guide of how, the framework of how to onboard folks within your department. So because I am a research administrator, I use this on how to onboard new research administrators, whether they're in my office or whether they're out in the department. So you can just take some of the stuff and tweak it a little bit to suit your needs. So what is onboarding? So onboarding, as we see here, it's organizational socialization, refers to the mechanism through which a new employee may acquire the necessary knowledge, skills, and behaviors to become effective organizational members and insiders. So that's really what onboarding is. You want someone to really be a part of your group, and it's not just training just to train. You want them to really be there for the long haul. So one of the things I just want to do a quick pulse on the group. How many of you train in your office? Okay, you train. Okay, good. So you guys are trainers.
Sometimes.
Okay. So when onboarding is done correctly, you're going to have higher job satisfaction. You're going to have a commitment not only to your department, but to your organization. You're going to have a lower turnover, so you're not just going to have people that are just like, okay, what is it I need to do? And then what is it I need to learn? So they're there for when the next job opening comes, I can go ahead and take that other job. You want somebody who's going to be effective in their career. And another thing, too, is you're going to have an employee with low stress. And that in itself is a major plus. So this is the onboarding process. So think of this as like a puzzle. So the onboarding process involves you orientate them, you integrate, you engage, you follow up, and of course, the first thing you do is prep. But if you really think about making sure that onboarding is really a holistic approach, so a lot of this never ever goes away, especially like in the field of grants and contracts, because we're always going to be onboarding, whether it's a new employee or whether it's a current employee and maybe doing something new. Let's say it's a new, something new with Banner, something new with the regulation. You still have to go through all of that process. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is that when you go back and you onboard new employees, or you may just onboard someone in a new process, keep this up and you remember all five of these things. So this is a really cool visual. So the thing with onboarding is you want to be able to create a positive learning experience. And I would say, how many of us have been in this situation? The only thing worse than training your employees and having them leave, it's not training them and having them stay. How many times are we faced with some of these, especially if you come into a new department? I mean, you can immediately pick out the folks that weren't trained, appropriately. And remember is that, as we said, a beginning is a very delicate time. So I have this philosophy, it's like pay me now or pay me later. I'd rather make my investment in the beginning, putting in as much time into onboarding an employee rather than doing it on the tail end somewhere, because I don't want to have to not train them and then having them stay, and then you don't have a very good employee. So there are 4 C's. Okay, before I get into that, what I wanted to let you know, there is this really interesting, oops, let me back up a little bit. There's a really interesting statistic, is that, did you know the cost to hire one person, let's say recruitment time, training, and productivity, averages about $15,000. So that in itself is a reason why we really need to make sure that we onboard. Okay. So now we're going to get into the 4 C's, which compliance, clarification, culture, and connection. So compliance, think of these as levels. So compliance is the lowest level. It includes teaching basic, let's say, legal, policy, rules, regulations. So this is basically the compliance part. Okay, here's the UA rules, here are the UAF rules, these are the policies, this is what we need to abide by. So that's all compliance is, and that's exactly what it is. It's just making sure you comply to some of the basic things that we do in our jobs. The next thing is clarification, and this refers to ensuring that employees understand their new job and all related expectations. So it's one of those things that's really clarifying and making clear what is it that's expected of them. So one of the things that I like to do whenever I get a new employee come in, the first thing I do is I sit down with them with their job description, and we go through it line by line by line to make sure that they then understand from an employee-employer relationship, that they really understand what is it that they are going to be held to. Because when you do your performance evaluation, let's say at the end of the year, at the end of like their first year, they're being held on their job expectations against what they were hired to do, which is their job. So how many of you do that right now? Go through sit down with them with their job description. Yeah, and another thing too is that what makes it really nice is that if there isn't clarification, then that's where some of the conversation occurs. So if you haven't done it already, that might be a really good time to, so you may not have done it at the beginning. It might be a good time just to go ahead and sit down with them, but read it first, because you don't want any surprises. Go, oh my God, I didn't remember that said that there. So that would be something that needs to happen. Another thing is the culture is really a broad category that includes providing employees with a sense of organizational norms, both formal and informal. So this is what we call the social integration, and acceptance by the peer is essential to the job. So, I mean, you have your job, but then you have the culture of your department, and it's like the rhythm of your department. And many times, folks aren't trained on that. So one of the things, I've been in my department for 5 months, and there's definitely an organizational culture there, which is very different from my organizational culture within my department. People go to lunch at 12 and they leave they go to lunch at 12 and they come back from lunch at 1. But that's something that, as an example, it's something that might seem really minor, but it's something that folks need to understand the culture. So part of that is when a new person comes in and say, most people like to go to lunch at this time. That doesn't mean you have to go to lunch during this time. So it's those little kinds of things as onboarding folks to like the culture of the office. So there's some interesting cultural things that happen in your office. Do you want to share? Yes.
We have a potluck once a month for lunch.
Okay. That's an interesting culture that, it's a part of the onboarding.
We had some, we're in the same department.
Okay.
We had some turnover previously, and one of the complaints was that there wasn't as friendly a culture.
And it wasn't as a social, everybody came in and just went to work. And so one of the things our supervisors trying to do is, engage everybody. It's our business meeting, but we also, we talk business, but we also get
But
together.
it's still a culture. But that's a really great point. I'm glad your supervisor does that, because once again, the onboarding is really a holistic way to bring an employee and really look at the whole employee and getting them acclimated to the work with the low stress level. And where training is like, do this, do this, do this, do this. So that's why I said the culture is really important, because someone may know the job, but if they don't quite understand the culture can actually be so dominating in an office where it could actually make the training much, much harder, because somebody may not be used to that particular culture. And connection is the last one, is that it refers to the vital interpersonal relationships and the information networks that all employees must establish. So like in your work environment, I mean, like you've been there for 3 months. I'm sure that there's that one person that everyone goes to. You see, so that's a part of making sure that really when a new person comes in, making sure to try and get them connected with as many different folks. One of the things I'm changing with my culture with new folks is that one of the cultures was there was one person who did all the training for everyone. But that was the culture. So now changing the culture, and because I want to create more of a connection, because we're hiring for 2 people. When we then begin to onboard our new, our potentially new employees, I want them to be able to be trained by different people. And that's my thinking on that, is because everyone brings a certain strength to what they do, and people train very, very differently. So you may have someone who's very, very strong in one aspect. So I want that person to train them on, let's say, drawdowns, because they're the most amazing drawdown person. Another may be very strong in, let's say, in reconciliations or invoicing. I want that person, because when a person comes on, it's really important that in order for them to have that connectedness, everyone needs to be a part of that, that training. It's almost like, what did Hillary Clinton say quite a few years back? It takes a village to raise up a child. It takes the village of an office to really invest in that new employee. So that's where that connection makes it really important. So the thing with the connection is that what you need to do for those of you who are potentially going to be training or onboarding new employees is then to sit down with those folks and say, by the LPs in my office, by the way, LP, we have this new employee starting. You're really strong in some of the state, any issues related to the state, I want you to take the lead on training this person. So that's how you also create a connection. So then when the new person comes in, LP right away knows what that connection is, rather than here's employee X who's here. Hey, by the way, LP, you're going to be training on this person, which is not what you want to be able to do. And all 4 of these need to be in place in order to have an optimal, an optimal onboarding experience. So one of the things too is to define the needs and the goals. So all of this happens before the person even starts in the office. So one of the things is defining the needs of the department. You define the needs because there was a position that was open. So you go, let's look at the job description. That's something I'm going to do. What needs to happen? Well, as a grant and contract analyst, this is what this person needs to be able to do, and this is who needs to be able to do the onboarding and to do the training of this person in a particular area. So one of the things you do is that you define the short and long-term goals and identify the possible training to meet those goals. And then what you do is you develop individual training modules based, and I'm going to go through some of, I've got samples of these, training modules based on your defined needs and goals. So here is their job, this is what they need. What is everything I need to do to make sure that they are successful and onboarded as a new employee to the department, to make sure that they need to get everything. Like for you, you said that you do the travel. So what is everything that you need to make sure that you need, you know, you're able to be as successful as possible in travel? Oh, we need to make sure to have a meeting with grants and contracts. That's not within the department. That is maybe a short time to say that's a part of our meeting. Oh, you have to go meet with accounting and financial services because they have a certain part of the training. Oh, we have to be able to get you in the TEMS system. So these are all these types of things that should really be identified before you start training a person. One of the things too is that I want to also emphasize is that sometimes it's not too late to take this on if you may not have a new employee. Like for example, I just started, I did not hire any of my employees yet, but what I've done is I've still taken my needs and goals and said, what is it I need to do with some of my staff to make sure that I feel that they're trained in certain ways. So that's something else that you can also use the same type of pathway to say, what is it I need to do? So another thing that you do is you assess. So when you assess, maybe you might involve your staff members. You have to assess regularly. You keep the assessment simple and you take it from different angles, and it's open and clear communication. So what you do is that when, for example, if I say I'm going to be training part of the onboarding of this particular employee, now that I've gotten them the culture, I've had clarity and consistency and all of that, I say, okay, LP, you're going to be training on this person and onboarding them on everything to do with the state. So part of that, I'm going to say, LP, what's your training? What are the top things that you feel that you need to have for the person? And I really believe in writing some of this stuff down, because then when a person's been trained, you can then go back and say, does the person have knowledge in this area? Does the person have knowledge in this area? Does the person have knowledge in this area? It doesn't have to be a long sheet, but at least some sort of checklist. And then therefore, I can then come to LP and say, well, LP, I've noticed that this new employee doesn't quite have this particular training on their belt. What do you think? Are you not training this person differently? And she might come back and say, well, they don't do this anymore. They've switched it from 3 months ago. Something has changed. But you see how you have to involve other staff members in it. One of the things I want to preface is that because onboarding, you're basically taking a new employee's career path into your own hands. Be very, very careful about the staff members you choose to involve in the training. Not everyone can be classified as a really good trainer. So you have to be able to, it's a very, very fine line. So not everyone's a good trainer. So you have to be able to identify the folks that you feel are going to take this training and onboarding of this person very, very, very seriously. And another thing too is make sure, like I said, you have to keep the assessment of the person simple, because once again, remember that puzzle. It's a continuous process. Another thing too with onboarding is planning. You plan your training by identifying individuals and groups likely to benefit from it. So just because there are other people in your office, it doesn't mean that everyone else is really good at training. And if you wouldn't go to them for training, why would you send your new person to them for training? So be able to identify, but this is the key, is that person going to benefit from it? Another thing is to create a training matrix for each individual. So a really easy thing to do is you take your training, how do you create a really easy training matrix? You can say, here's the job description of what a person's going to be doing. You can have that all down in columns, and then maybe the next column is like, what system do they need to be trained on? Who is the best individuals that need to train? Maybe who's the best department? And so then therefore, as you move along, that training, then it makes it very, very easy to then cross off if they've been trained and onboarded. So this, you would have their tasks or roles as their new, as the employee. Then right here you can say, okay, is there systems? Oh, by the way, this person needs to use Thames Banner maybe for this one, maybe it's something else, maybe it's Excel. And then over here you're like, okay, who's the person? Okay, for this particular task in their job, what's the system that maybe there might not be a system, but then it needs to be, let's say this is John who's training. Or maybe for this particular task, this is this person needs to have knowledge of grant and contract forms. Oh, I need to make sure to get a hold of someone in grants and contracts who can then train the person on this. So this is a really easy way to kind of do a training matrix that once again all ties back into the a job description that they have. Another thing is to ensure that training is scheduled regularly and trainees become engaged. I can't emphasize this enough, but when a new employee comes on board, one of the things is their time is just as valuable as yours. And what I've seen happen to folks is that, oh yay, the person's here, I let them off into the department, and then it's like, so how's it going as you're passing by? And that is not the way to do it. So going back to the planning is really important. So a person's, let's say, is going to start on Monday. When they come in on Monday, you say, here is what your training schedule is going to look like. You're going to meet with me every morning for half an hour. And me as a supervisor, ensuring I want my employee to be happy and making sure that they're vested, is then I say, I'm scheduling this. So I actually put it on my calendar, and that is protected time. Because that's the key. It's like you have a new employee, you're onboarding them, you need to have that protected time because you want them to feel valued and you want them to feel wanted and say, you know what, I made a great choice to come work in this department. Yes, it was your choice to hire them, but there was also their choice to accept the offer to come and work, come and work with you. And in that way, it gives you an opportunity, especially if you've designated other folks to train with them. So LP, tell me, so how is the training going with Martha? Is everything working out okay? Is there anything? And then that way you can see if that training relationship, that connectedness is happening. And then another thing, make sure you schedule it so it's less disruptive. Because what I've noticed happened with trainings from other departments and also too from past experiences that people have really good intent. That's why it's important to schedule those trainings. So it's like I schedule them in the morning with me because that way at least I know I'm not being interrupted with telephone calls. This person has my full attention. I've given them everything that they need. So that might be something else to make sure that when you even schedule them with other people that there is a schedule there. Because people have their other job to do, and then on top of it, they're helping to onboard someone else. But if you say, okay, Mary, you're going to be training John, and you're going to be training him on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 1 to 4. Then people can then therefore work out their schedules, and then it doesn't become burdensome. Like, oh my gosh, I've got to go train and onboard the new person today. So once again, this is a sample training. So you have for the week 1, what's the first thing they're going to do when they come into the office? It's like, okay, well, here's the culture. Here's our attire, here's our work, this is our stuff. Maybe you might say, okay, well, let's get all of, I call this the housekeeping stuff. So this might be, for example, okay, this is how the phone works, this is how the mail works, this is how this works, and stuff like that. So that might be, let's say this might be the office manager, the secretary, the assistant who's in charge of that. But you see how these are different people, which means the whole office is a part of onboarding. And then maybe a part of that, especially if they're new to the university, you can say, okay, well, this is how our university operates, and this is how, this is the culture of how things are. And then you can then say, okay, well, this is our office, and this is our organizational chart. That might take, a couple of hours. And then you might say, okay, well, I'm going to go over some aspects of research administration, and then you might do some other stuff. But you get the gist of everything. You create that, you just create that roadmap. So this is just a sample that you could use. But once again, you see how it's not just about here's your job of what you can do, but it's also incorporating everything else. So it's a holistic onboarding. Here is another sample checklist. And once again, this is all kind of focused around research administration, but you get the gist. So for example, let's say on the pre-award side, the person needs to know how to create a proposal, create an award, and do all of these different things. You see, you can break these down into tasks, and then you can say, so if I had John over here create the proposal, can the new employee, the trainee, do they feel comfortable with it? And then you have the trainer initial 2 that says, yes, I trained this person on how to do this. Now what you've done is you created a system of accountability. Because I can guarantee when somebody has to put their initials here, they're going to be a lot more careful with the training. And I think what's really nice too is that you've given the trainer some sort of, you give them the responsibility, but now you've given them the accountability that goes with the responsibility. Because how many times do you just say, here, you're going to get trained, and you have zero accountability, but you're responsible for it. So this way it ensures that everyone is on the same page, especially if you are a manager or supervisor, in which you want to make sure if you get other folks in the office to help onboard that new person. See, so you have budget, you can have budget. How comfortable do you know all this, all of this stuff? So implementation is, let me go back to this really quick. So the thing with this is that this might be something when you meet with your new employee, let's say with your designated protected times, you can bring this sample checklist and say, okay, are we on track? Are we not on track? What is it that we still need to do? Oh my goodness, I'm missing this one particular piece. So the thing is, implementation is also the next thing, is that depending on your situation in the work, I've seen people use professional trainers or an experienced employee. So it depends on what happens. What I've done with my staff, I haven't done it here. Like I said, I have 2 job openings in advertising, is that I will send my new staff, because especially if they're new to grants and contracts where they have the fundamental accounting information, I'll send them to an outside 1-week crash course by some professional trainers, specifically on like fundamentals. Because it's really important for me is that You can train someone in how to do something from an institutional, but if you really want a strong employee, like this is what we do institutionally, but this is how it fits into the bigger scope of things. So when I send them to a professional outside trainer, it's like, this is the area of research administration, regardless of whether you work for UAF or University of New York or University of Miami. So it goes back to, but it depends on the person's position. You might use multimedia too. My other job, I supervised. I had clinical grants and contract officers that were primarily focused in on clinical trials. So one of the folks that I had hired in, she did not have direct clinical trial skills, but she did have transferable skills. She used to negotiate entertainment contracts. I figure if you can negotiate entertainment contracts, you can definitely do clinical trials, because there's a lot of transferable language and things like that in there. So part of that, to make sure that I gave her the framework, there were some webinars with some online tests that she could take. So at least that way I understood if she had the, she was getting some of the basic concepts. So once again, if you're depending on your field, you can bring in different tools. Like there's webinars, there's presentations, there's DVDs, there's different things. Always solicit feedback from your trainees, because a lot of times you want to make sure that you're not moving too quickly, you're not moving too fast. You want to make sure that they're getting what they need. Maybe there's things that you need to concentrate on. But really encourage them and say that when we meet in the mornings or in the afternoons, it's like, I'm going to ask you for your feedback, and I really want honest feedback, because I'm only here to make sure that you benefit and then you get the best onboarding that you can. And then also, too, then that makes it easy to assess their readiness to apply their new skills. So let's say you're in an office where, for example, you're a grant and contract analyst. I've gone through all of this, and it's just like, ooh, I don't think you're quite ready. You probably need another two more weeks before you start getting your own portfolio. It's really important, because it's better to wait 2 weeks than to just dive that person in, and then that person ends up making mistakes and feel like they should have learned this already. But once again, it's just assessing that. Okay, so this is something. I've showed you the ropes, I've given you the lowdown, gotten you up to speed, and all that's left is to train you. You're like, really? So onboarding is everyone's job. So things I want to say is, don't underestimate the peer-to-peer support that some of the other colleagues might provide, because I think it's something that might happen naturally. So in an office, it may not be called training, but if you go ahead and tell your office before a new employee starts and say, hey, we've got this person's officially starting, I really expect everyone, if they have any questions, to please make sure to, if this new person has any questions, please make sure to answer their questions and really be there, and that's how you're going to start to build up your team. So really encourage your employees that they may not be there during that, they may not be the designated trainer, but that doesn't mean they're still not involved in making sure to onboard that employee, because other team members play a critical role, because they provide support, and more importantly, they provide a welcoming environment. Because have you guys ever been in a place where you've gone in and you're like, oh my God, I think I made a mistake, because it's just not a welcoming place. So here's another tool you can take back, as we talked about, when you onboard, it really is supporting that learning environment. And that's what your job is. You're always constantly learning. So you provide your training, you provide, hands-on, you maybe provide advanced training depending on the job level of the person. And then you might provide some education. But all of this stuff doesn't change. And then once again, these two things are what holds it. You support and you assess. You support, you assess, and this is just the meat that goes in between. It's like I call it the sandwich life, the sandwich of training and education. So one of the things is, like we talked about, yes, a new employee comes in. They are going to go through new employee orientation. All that is just your introduction to a new place. You might have special topic sessions and workshops. So one of the things I've done in the past is we have water cooler meetings. We still do. And basically it might be it's a 30-minute meeting with all the office to talk about maybe something that's ongoing and current that's just happened, or maybe somebody who's been faced in the office with something that no one else has seen before. That's a great way to just get people really oriented. So it's not this perfect training, but this is like a part of your training are these real life things that might come your way. So that's another thing to do. Another thing is peer training, like what we said, is linking someone up with one of their colleagues, but once again, being very careful to see who that person is you link them with. And sharing your knowledge with the folks. So once again, you've got lots of experience, lots of background, and act as a resource for your trainees, because they come to you for that guidance and knowledge. And then sometimes, depending on the situation, you might offer advanced educational opportunities. You might offer university courses. The pre-award side, sometimes they offer CRAs, which is a Certified Research Administrator. So there's lots of things that can be offered, but essentially, all of this is you are investing in an employee. And you're not just training them in just that your department's way and it's either this way or the highway. So another thing is you might do learning teams. I've done this before, reading groups. So for example, if there's a new piece of legislation that's out, or a new regulation or policy from NIH or NSF, let's all get together and let's talk about it. What a great way to, that's another training. It's not formal, but it's a form of training. Brown bag lunch. Hey, let's get together and let's have a brown bag lunch, maybe to go over some of the reading stuff. I have articles that I get on some compliance things related to grants and contracts. I send that out, another form of education. But you see, some of this stuff, you can do that right now, even with some of your current employees. So this is not just limited to new employees. Once again, mentoring them, guiding them, if there's anything that they need, being there for them. And then we talked about computer-based training, the webinars that are out there. There's lots of tools. Once again, depending on your area. In my professional association, there's a lot available for computer-based training because research administrators are at every single university across the United States. So there's a lot of stuff out there. So really use your resources are out there. One of the things too is that cannot be underestimated is that, and this is not just, I know we're talking about new employees, but it's really important to get the staff in the habit of learning, because if you get the staff into the habit of learning, then believe it or not, it goes back to that puzzle piece in the beginning. You're always going to be training, assessing, and doing all of that stuff, because everything we do, our jobs change constantly. So if you create, as a supervisor, this environment of learning, when new people come aboard, that's the culture you're going to create, where everyone's going to want to learn and not be like, I can't show you because I won't have a job. So, yeah. Just-in-time training is really interesting, and I tend to use this one a lot. Do you guys know what that is? Okay. Just-in-time training, for example, I get an email from, let's say, NSF that says, we're having issues with this particular grant, or this particular invoice, or this particular drawdown, whatever that issue is. So what I do is then I go to the person and say, hey, I just got this email. This is a perfect learning thing for you to know. Let me walk you through the process of, this is why we got this. This is what we need to do. This is how we're going to resolve it. So that's what I call just in time. And really, that actually is really, really powerful. So when you have situations, yes, it might be easier for you to do it yourself, but why not bring a new person in and say, hey, you know what, I wanted to share this with you. This is something that you may come across it. It happens probably, a few times a year, but at least you know what to do. What's really important is that they get to see what, number one, how you respond to it, how you think about it, and how you resolve it. And those kinds of skills, that person will then take your habits and then respond to situations like that. They'll like read it, educate themselves on it, respond to it, and solve it. And that's why just in time is really important, because it's all that, it's all the stuff. And then you educate as well as train. So one of the things that is also, when I say educate as well as train, is that don't just train for the sake of training. What you do is like, okay, well, for example, going back to the just-in-time training, let me tell you why this came aboard. Let me tell you some of the history. That's educating. The reason that we have this is because of this particular piece of policy that we have. This is what this policy says. That's educating. So you're just not training. So then therefore, you ultimately want that new employee to be able to be self-sufficient on their own and really be able to think. You want critical thinking staff, and that's what that does. Another thing, expect to train in a variety of different skills. I mean, that's pretty standard. And then perform a skills assessment for everyone. So you might say, okay, I need to train you on Excel. I need to train you on these particular banner. I need to train you on these government systems. And recognize not everybody learns the same. I am a visual learner. So some people learn by listening, some people learn by touching. There's just different ways. You have to kind of get a feel for people and how they train, but try and incorporate the different types of learning, like write things out. Like I like to write things out a lot, so try and incorporate some of that. One of the things with also too for tips on onboarding is motivate everyone. I mean, sometimes training can be and onboarding can be really, really boring. But just try and make it as motivating, because you're the first introduction many times to a person coming into the university or maybe your department, and you want to set that standard. And then expect that I've done it before syndrome. And being new to the university, it's this is what I say. It's like, I've done it before. I'm like, no, but you haven't done it my way. Because then what you can say was like, yeah, you've done it before, but I guarantee you haven't done it before because all of the players are different. This is different, and that's different. So the subject might be the same. You've done it before, but not the approach. So I mean, there's different ways you can go about it. And recognize that you cannot retrain everyone at once. So a lot of these things are just, you can use it not only for onboarding your new employees, but you can also do it for your current employees. And like I said, with this one is just don't expect that you're going to like train everyone at one time. Sometimes you have to train in phases. And teach from experience. It goes back to the just in time. Put your life's experiences in there and said, you know what, I had this experience before. I mean, that's a part of onboarding. Yeah, people want to hear that, and recognize that people don't quit because they're trained. They quit for other reasons. So, who doesn't like Dilbert? I desperately need to take this training. Well, we can't spare you. Send Wally and have him tell you what we learned. I'm awed by the sheer artistry of your mismanagement skills. Thank you. So this is another thing, too, for those of you who might be new to training. I've read this book, The New Leader's 100-Day Action Plan, on onboarding process for leaders at every level. And then there is my information. So in closing, you know, just really take a holistic approach to onboarding your new staff. And these are like the things I mentioned. These are like just different things that you could really make the onboarding really effective, because ultimately you want your employees to stay and to be vested and to feel like they're part of the greater good of your department, not just be a stepping stone to something else. So on that, are there any questions?
Does the university provide the leeway to do effective onboarding? I mean, I understand. I'm not a supervisor at this time. So are there, you know, you can train a new employee. Yes, we all have the mandatory HR safety and all that, but you have the leeway to train up to 80 hours per fiscal year or anything like that, or is that entirely up to the discretion and the budget of the department? I just don't understand how much support supervisors have to actually put this into action.
I'll tell you, having been at different universities, you know, different places, a lot of this has to do with your department and the culture. I mean, that's the honest thing. I mean, a university is going to support you in onboarding of the HR, the safety, because that's the easy stuff. This is the difficult stuff. And it starts from the top down. Okay. So if you want to create this culture, I sometimes feel it has to start with yourself. So yes, you may not supervise people, but what you can say is like, hey, you know what? I know we have this opening. I have this training plan. I think this would be great to make sure that we onboard someone appropriately. But you see how you could use, you may not be directly supervising, but you can use your strength in your position to then guide your supervisor. That's what I call managing up.
Yeah, okay.
You're managing up that way. But a lot of it is the culture of the training is in the department. I mean, look around you. You can probably tell the departments that lose people like this, because you're like, are they training or are they really invested in that whole employee and making sure that they stay? Because I've told my staff, it's like, I'm invested in making sure that you guys grow professionally and not just to train, because anybody can train but I want people who I know are going to stay in the department, and I don't want to have a revolving door. So I'm changing that culture to ensure that this is what happens. Yes.
I appreciate the training matrix that you pointed out.
Oh, please put your emails here, and I'll go ahead and send you the PowerPoint. Yeah.
So I think I'm going to take that back to my unit.
What's your name?
INE.
Oh, cool.
So, but one of the things I was going to say is that this summer we did a webinar
On the new curriculum?
on the new. Yeah.
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah. So, and I bring that up, I guess, because the university, not just our unit, but the entire university travel expenditures, they're going to be scrutinized quite a bit next year or so.
Everyone, yeah.
So everybody's going to be affected by that. So I'm encouraging the folks in our unit to really think of other webinar opportunities that we can all collectively get together, like all 7 of us did this morning, and it was a lot less expensive than sending people to conferences and whatnot. And it was just something that kind of came to mind when listening to your presentation this morning. Those alternative ways to train people.
There are so many different ways, and it's about being creative. Because my prior 2 institutions ago, you know, they from California, we went through severe budget cuts, and you have to think it's like you can't pay people anymore. You can't do certain things, but what can you do to still make sure that folks continue to grow? And I just say use your resources. So if you know of, like, your employees need training, contact other folks and say, hey, you know, in your industry, does your industry offer professional development via webinars? Because I know in our industry we have webinars on clinical trials, subawards, IP stuff. And so I just say really use your resources, and I think it's part of leveraging and say you might potentially have new people, I might potentially have new people. How can then we leverage together? I mean, I love doing stuff like that. So we had it this morning with statewide and stuff. Yeah, but how do you leverage some of that?
And then pushing that decision making down to folks that are actually doing the work. What training do you see is available that would be helpful to your job? Because I'm not going to know that.
Well, and that's why I think it's just, you may not have new employees right now, but really take this opportunity and just say, you know, let me look through their job descriptions. Because that's what I did when I first started at UAF. I mean, like I said, I've been here 5 months. The first thing I did was, like, I went through everyone's job description to say, how can I hold people to a certain standard if their job description is not even what they said they're supposed to be doing? So that might be a perfect thing to start and say, okay, well, here's the job description that's in place. Their, what do you call it, the position description. And then you say, okay, is this outdated? Wait a minute, this is new. We need to, let's go ahead and emphasize certain things that need to happen. Because you have, as the supervisor, you have to come up with that roadmap. You can't expect your employees to come up with it. So, I mean, like I said, the perfect roadmap is start with their job descriptions. And then you can say, because I just recently changed their job description, so now they're branded contract analysts. But a part of it was, it raised the bar and said, okay, well, this is the expectation. The job description has been rewritten. The bar has now been raised because this is really what you guys are doing. Now we're talking apples to apples and oranges to oranges. Because how many times have you come into a place and you're like, I don't even do that anymore. Whose job description is this? So, yeah. There's lots and lots. One of the things too is that I would like to do, and I'm throwing this out there because I know you guys are a really big department, is job shadowing. Because I've been on both sides. I've been in a big department when I was at UCSD, and then I've been in the central office. So I can play, I know what both sides are. So that's something that I'm actually would love to do, not like in this immediate time, but maybe next year. Because a lot of my staff have never been in a department before, and I can guarantee a lot of your staff have never been in a central. What a great way to just kind of job shadow for a week. Number one, you give people an appreciation for what really happens, because in a department, grants and contracts is like this, because then you've got everything else that the department has to do with faculty, there's salaries, there's science, and you can go on and on. But in our world, in the central, it's this. So that's something I think would be really, really good to do. And that way, you once again, you're growing them, you're growing the employee and saying, you know what, this is what life is on the other side. It isn't necessarily green, but at least it gives you an opportunity. So if you want to be like the first office that does it, I think.
I'm all ears.
Yeah. Because I think especially now with budget cuts and things like that, we have to think of ways to really invest in our employees. And I think really it's like if you create a really nice framework for your employees, money isn't the only reason why they'll leave. They leave for other stuff. It's not just money. And creating that, creating that environment. And that's what I want to do. I think everybody should get paid $1 million, but unfortunately I can't pay them $1 million. But there are things that I can do to make sure that I invest in them. So some of it is like if it means the job shadowing, then what you're doing is you're creating stronger employees on both sides. On both sides. But
Yeah, sign us up for that job shadow.
Huh?
Sign us up for job shadow.
Well, especially too, because I don't know if you guys know, but I have the pre and post award side is now they're not integrated together. So a part of that is I'm creating teams, because for me it's like we do, the science is going towards team-based science. Therefore, our administrative stuff should go towards team-based, and that's a part of team-based. Working with our departments is very team-based. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. But I love like training and onboarding and stuff like that. Were you guys here for the past class on mentoring? Yeah. That's another thing I do with my employees is I have this book. I do strength-based leadership. So a part of that is I do. Everyone gets a book, and it was actually ordered before I started because I think Wanda had talked to me. I'm like, order this book for the staff. And what it is that it's a book with 34 themes, and those themes range from analytical to deliberative to communicator to strategic. Everyone's got different themes. So everyone takes this assessment, and then your five themes. So in there, it's a really great icebreaker for new employees, and it gives people an opportunity to really interact with people. So on mine, my themes are I'm futuristic, I'm positive, self-ideation, input. So with my particular themes, when people, and it's on everyone's cubicle and on my door. So when you come into my office or speak with me, you're like, okay, well, let's see, she's futuristic. Okay, how can I now communicate with her? So it forces people to slow down. So I do that. So that's another part of my onboarding process. I give people this assessment because many times you're in situations where people are like, you have to be good at this, you have to be good at this. The reality is you're never be good at it. That's not your strength. So this is a really good tool to give to employees. And it's actually really fun because the majority of people in the office are empathetic. So it's really is interesting. So then you kind of get a feel for how to match, people up. And then it's part of the strengths-based leadership I do. So let's say there's a project I need to be done. I don't pick projects based on people. It's based on their themes. So if a project, you say, this is a project, let's say the OMB circular that we're going to be doing. This is a project. What types of strength do we need to make sure that this project is successful? We need someone who's strategic. Okay, we need someone who's analytical. We need someone with the strength of responsible. Then you bring in those themes. So then therefore, it gets away from the personality-based training for people. Like, well, I'm going to pick you because I know you always will be happy. I'm going to pick you because I know you'll just do it. And, So it's a different type of way to it's a different type of way to manage, but it gets away from like the personalities and makes it really easy to onboard people. Because then when people come in, they know that I'm being onboarded based on my strengths and not because, you know, I can do anything, you know, anything else. So that's another way to onboard, you know, when you pick people, it's like, okay, for this particular thing, who's the best person for it, not necessarily who's been here the longest. Because someone who's been here the longest may not necessarily be they just know all the ins and outs of how to get things through the university. But do you really want someone, who's really going to say, this is your job, not necessarily how you can get through somewhere the easiest. And that's, yeah. So if there's anything, you guys have my email, just email me, come by my office. I have an open door policy, so give me a call, I'm really open, or just give me an email and then say, okay, I'm gonna call you now. So anyway, but thank you all very, very, very much. And I'll be sure to email you guys the stuff, so I appreciate it. Have a great rest of the afternoon, and thank you for your service to the university.
Thanks for coming in after your crazy trip.
Everything. It was my pleasure. Thank you. We'll get through this right there.
Quite the circular.
Huh?
Quite the adjustments. The circular.
I actually, I actually started the process back in March, but because I have to go through for everything, so I've been working with state. I actually came up with that back in March. State Farm was just taking for. So that's why I sent the special invitation to statewide. I said, look, you guys will be relieved, but I said this, I was like, I don't want to be assertive, but there's certain things that I can't wait for.